Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Had a Secret Healing Quirk. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Here's the sad truth, not all men are born equal. That is what Izuku Midoriya learned at the tender age of 4. For his was a world where the supernatural was totally normal. People were born with uncanny abilities, called quirks. The streets looked like scenes ripped straight from a comic book. Some people could breathe fire or levitate objects with their mind. Others had incredible strength or could shatter stone with their voice alone. Izuku Midoriya was not one of those people. He was weak. He was useless. He was quirkless. And when he was 4 years old, that was the harsh truth he was forced to learn. He also learned that he ate a lot more than other people. All right, settle down, the teacher said as class began, and the students got in their seats. As third-year students, you guys need to start to think seriously about your futures. He picked up a stack of papers off his podium. Now, I could hand out these career aptitude tests, but he threw the papers into the air with a flourish and a laugh. Why bother? I know you're all aiming for the hero course. At that, the classroom erupted in absolute chaos. Students roaring wildly and showing off their quirks like they were kindergartners. All except for Izuku, who shrank into his desk while he munched on a granola bar. You're probably wondering why he's eating in class. Well, there's a very simple explanation for that. Ever since he was a child, Izuku has possessed a monstrous appetite. He could eat 3 to 4 times as much food as some his size and age normally could, although he never seemed to gain a pound. His pediatrician chalked it up to an abnormally high metabolism. The other kids joked about his quirk being a black hole for a stomach, but those stopped after that fateful doctor's appointment. At first, his teachers tried to get Izuku to stop eating in class, but in the end, his growling, his roaring and screaming stomach proved to be a bigger distraction than his snacking ever could. So they gave up and let him eat. So long as he did so quietly. Oh yeah, Midoriya, didn't you apply to UA as well? The teacher said dispassionately. Oh no, Izuku thought, nearly choking on his granola. You think can compete with me, you fat, quirkless nerd? Katsuki Bakugo, Izuku's childhood best friend, and current bully shouted as he jumped on the green-haired boy's desk. He went tumbling backward out of his chair as Bakugo set off explosions from his palms. As usual, the teacher seemed content to stand by and let everyone take out their aggression on Izuku. Don't even think of applying, or else. Just pray you'll be born with a quirk in your next life, and take a swan dive off the roof. Bakugo's words still rang in Izuku's ears as he walked down the road, dejectedly eating another granola bar. Every day is the same, I try as hard as I can, but it's the same result every time, Izuku thought as he approached a tunnel. Kaken, my classmates, the teachers, even Mom, none of them think I can do it. Maybe they're right, maybe I should just. He suddenly stopped at the entrance to the tunnel. No, Izuku thought as he clenched his fist in determination. I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't let anything or anyone hold me back. I will become a hero. With a smile on his face, he entered the tunnel and let out a mighty laugh, unaware of the slime rising out of the utility hole he just passed. I'm sorry, but without a quirk, you can't become a hero. Izuku walked forward in a daze, completely unaware of where he was or where he was going, but he didn't care. His dream of becoming had been crushed by his idol, the man Izuku had looked up above everyone else, All Might. He couldn't really blame the hero for what he'd said. Risking your life to protect others was a dangerous line of work. No one got out of it unscathed, not even All Might, the #1 hero and symbol of peace. But even so, it hurt so much in a way Izuku couldn't even begin to describe. His steps were brought to a halt as the sounds of shouts and fighting brought Izuku out of his stupor. Heroes, Izuku thought as he absent-mindedly looked up. Must be a villain attack, guess I walked here subconsciously. He saw Kamu Woods and Death Arms, 2 of the heroes he saw this morning. What am I even doing here? My notes are useless, there's nothing I can do. Even so, Izuku was compelled to get a better look. He got closer to see no. No, it couldn't be. That's the slime guy All Might caught earlier. What's he doing here? A horrifying realization struck Izuku. The soda bottle All Might trapped him in must have fallen out of the hero's pocket when Izuku grabbed his leg. This is my fault. Izuku couldn't stop shaking. If I hadn't gotten in his way, then none of this would have happened. The young boy was on the verge of tears. He looked to see the heroes trying to get closer to the villain. And when he took a closer look at the amorphous villain he saw, Kaken! He cried out at the sight of his childhood friend being smothered by the villain. At that moment, something happened to Izuku that he couldn't explain. He saw Bakugo, the boy who had bullied him endlessly since they were children, trapped in the wet, disgusting, suffocating grip of the villain. He saw the fear and desperation in the blonde boy's eyes. Before he even realized what was happening, Izuku was running. Running towards the villain, towards the danger. Towards someone who needed help. Young man, you can become a hero. Izuku felt overwhelmed. Tears born from overwhelming shock, and joy poured from his eyes. All Might, his idol and inspiration, the man who had so cruelly and carelessly crushed his dream, was here to give what he needed most, hope. Your actions inspired me to move, and you reminded me what it means to be a hero, All Might said, his baggy clothes hanging off him like drapes. I deem you worthy of becoming my successor. My quirk is yours to inherit. And, like someone turning off a faucet, Izuku's tears were brought to a dead stop. Hair was all he could manage. Izuku looked up at his idol like the blonde man had inexplicably grown a second head and started singing opera. Honestly, considering the day he'd had, Izuku wouldn't have been surprised if that did happen. But that doesn't make sense. You can't give someone a quirk, it's impossible. I mean, well, it's never been proven you can't give someone a quirk, so I guess it's possible, but the implications. At that point, Izuku had started muttering and rambling to himself and was so deep in thought he'd pretty much shut out the entire world around him. Quite frankly, it was freaking All Might out. What the hell is with this kid? As the green-haired boy continued to ramble on with no sign of stopping, All Might decided to put an end to it. He took in a deep breath and prepared to shout, when suddenly, Jah! He was cut out by Izuku's growling stomach. Clutching his stomach with his face bright red, Izuku went dead quiet. Geez, All Might said, smiling. Sounds like you're pretty hungry. Tell you what, how about we find someplace to eat, and we talk this whole thing over? He held out his hand to the kneeling boy. Izuku was about to say something, but, Jah! He was cut off by his own stomach. He merely nodded and took the hero's hand. It had taken a little while, but the duo had found a small and quiet cafe called Jinko's and gotten a secluded booth at the back of the restaurant. The menu had a little bit of everything. All Might had gotten a tuna salad and bacon sandwich with cottage cheese. Izuku had gotten everything. Okay, he didn't order every item on the menu, but it was way more than All Might thought humanly possible to eat in a single setting. He was proven dead wrong. All Might could only stare in some strange combination of fascination, horror, disgust, awe, and envy as Izuku wolfed down a bowl of ramen after polishing off a plate of fried chicken and was preparing to move on to a bowl of curry. After finishing off the ramen and putting the bowl down, Izuku finally noticed All Might's rather intense gaze. He got very red and shrunk into himself. Sorry, I know watching me eat can be disturbing, to say the least. Izuku found himself looking down at his hands instead of up at All Might. You can move to another table if you want. No, it's fine, All Might said rather nervously. It's my fault for staring. I'm sorry for making you feel uneasy, young Midoriya. All Might glanced down at half-eaten sandwich and rubbed the back of his neck. Honestly, I'm a little jealous. My days of scarfing down huge meals are long behind me. His eyes drifted to the left side of his abdomen before returning to Izuku, a kind smile of his face. But seeing you eat with a big grin on your face, I'm not sure why, but it makes me feel better about my situation. Despite everything, seeing Izuku happy filled All Might with a strange, warm feeling he couldn't identify. Izuku was stunned by All Might's words. People had always said the way he ate was horrible, disgusting, sickening, and just plain wrong. Hearing those words, Izuku couldn't help but beam at his idol. All Might smiled back. Anyway, we're not here to talk about how much you can eat, All Might began before he cut himself off. The pro-hero craned his neck to make sure no one was within earshot of them. When he was satisfied, he leaned forward and spoke in a whisper. We're here to talk about you inheriting my quirk. Izuku leaned forward with his bowl of curry in hand. I still don't get it. How can you give me your quirk? That doesn't seem possible. I understand your skepticism, All Might said. From what I saw of your journal, you've got quite a passion for studying quirks. Izuku laughed nervously, a little embarrassed. When my mentor told me what I'm telling you, I thought it was some kind of sick joke, All Might explained. Your mentor? Izuku asked, a spoonful of curry halfway to his mouth. Yes. All Might brought his curled fist up to his chest. My quirk is a sacred torch that has been passed down from mentor to student since the emergence of quirks. It is the crystallization of each previous user's power, its name. Izuku felt as if All Might was gazing upon his very soul. His eyes held an intensity that seemed to lock the boy in place. One for all. Though quiet, the way All Might spoke those 3 words held a power Izuku couldn't explain. One for all, the green-haired boy parroted. Suddenly, a thought struck him. Hold on, if you mentor had one for all too, why haven't I heard of them? Wouldn't they be as powerful and famous as you? Not quite, All Might said, holding up a finger. One for all grows in power with every wielder, and I am the 8th person to bear this quirk. I am stronger than my predecessor, and she was stronger than hers, and you, young Midoriya, will be stronger than me. Izuku could only sit back and munch his food in contemplation, his eyes wide and wondering. All Might let the green-haired boy think for a moment before he spoke. I know it's a lot to take in, and I would never force one for all upon you. You don't have to decide now, but if you accept, meet me at Dagobah Municipal Beach Park 1 week from today, 5 a.m. sharp. A phone call is here. Izuku and All Might nearly jumped out of their skin at the sudden sound. A phone call is here. A phone call is here. A phone call is here. Izuku went scrambling for his phone as the official All Might ringtone blasted out of it. He didn't even notice All Might reaching into his own pocket. Sorry. Izuku said in panic while his face went red as his shoes. It's my mom, I mean my phone, I mean my mom calling my phone. He finally got his thumb on the answer button and held his phone to his ear. Hello? Izuku. He was not prepared for the volume of his mother's voice and had to hold the phone away from his ear. Where are you? I just saw the news. I saw Katsuki, and fire, and please tell me you're okay. Mom, don't worry, I'm fine, Izuku said in a desperate attempt to calm his mother down. But where are you? Why aren't you home? I'm at a cafe called Jinko's. After the police took Villain into custody, I came here with a dash. Izuku cut himself before he could finish that sentence. Izuku? Izuku, who are you eating with? Izuku's body shook as he tried desperately to think of what to say. I can't just tell her that I'm eating with All Might, but I can't just lie and say I'm by myself, she'd see right through it. You're scaring me, Izuku, please, just tell me what's wrong. Izuku was now sweating bullets, paralyzed with fear over what to say. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What do I dash? It was then he noticed All Might, motioning him to hand over the phone. Completely overwhelmed by the situation, he decided to go along with it, even though he had no idea how All Might would handle this. Actually, he wants to talk to you. I'll hand you off to him right now. All Might took the phone and cleared his throat. Hello, Mrs. Midoriya, it's wonderful to talk to you. Who are you? More importantly, how old are you, and why are you taking my son out to eat? My name is Toshinori Yagi, I'm All Might's secretary. All Might's secretary? Izuku thought. All Might's secretary? Yes, All Might, or rather Toshinori Yagi, spoke calmly and collectively. I was at the scene of the incident when All Might saved that young blonde boy. Your son saw me speaking with All Might and started firing off questions. We both got hungry, and I offered to get him something to eat. Oh, thank goodness. The relief in Inko Midoriya's voice was palpable. I was so worried. I'm glad to know my little boy's okay. Mom, why are you like this? Izuku thought. He loved his mother dearly. She was his whole world, and he was Inko's whole world. But while her fears and worries were, admittedly, not unfounded, it could feel overwhelming at times. If it's not too much trouble, could you bring him home soon? All Might smiled. Of course, I'll have young Midoriya home, safe and sound. Oh, and I can pay you back for whatever you spent on Izuku, Mr. Yagi. There a nervous tremor in Inko's voice that wasn't there before. It's not trouble, All Might said with a chuckle. Your son has been wonderful company, you don't need to give me a single yen. Are you sure? I know Izuku has a bigger appetite than most boys his age. You probably weren't expecting to spend so much on him. Truly it's no problem. Being the secretary to the number one hero comes with quite a few perks, which includes a rather large paycheck. I could do this every day for a month, it would barely put a dent in my budget. Alright then, thank you very much, Mr. Yagi. Can you please hand me back to my son? Of course, he said as he handed back the phone to Izuku. Mom? The boy said, taking his phone back. Okay, Izuku, I'll see you soon. Remember to thank Mr. Yagi for the meal. Okay. Bye, Mom. Bye, sweetheart. With that, Izuku ended the call. He looked at All Might for a moment, and All Might looked back. They let out breaths neither were aware they'd been holding and slumped in their seats. Holy crap, that was scary, Izuku said, breathless. Despite the solid decade of bullying Izuku had lived through, the few seconds between handing his phone to All Might had probably been the most terrifying and nerve-wracking experience in his young life. I hope you don't mind me asking, but is that your real name? Izuku asked tentatively. Yes, it's my real name, All Might said before taking a sip of water. Izuku looked down at the empty bowl that used to be full of curry. I'm sorry you had to tell my mom. Actually, I thought up the whole All Might secretary cover years ago. It's pretty convenient, All Might said reassuringly. I tell people all the time, so you've got nothing to be sorry for, especially not a caring mother. She just worries about you, and with the way you dive headfirst into danger, I'm not surprised, All Might said with a chuckle while Izuku grumbled in embarrassment. Are you almost done? The boy nodded and motioned to his 3 remaining dishes. All right, I'll grab the check, and then we'll get going. All Might called the waitress over, a woman with 4 arms and 5 eyes, and paid while Izuku went to work on some yakisoba. Again, thank you so much for taking care of Izuku, Inko said as she bowed rather profusely to All Might, although that was unbeknownst to her. You're sure I can't pay you back? Thank you for the kind offer, Mrs. Midoriya, but I can't take your money, All Might said, standing outside the doorway to the Midoriya's apartment. It was a pleasure to meet both you and your son. That's all the compensation I need. Inko smiled at the tall, blonde man. Oh, you're too kind, Mr. Yagi. Izuku, standing next to his mother, nodded in agreement. Thank you so much for answering my question. I learned a lot about All Might's agency with you. You're welcome. It was a joy talking with someone so passionate about heroics. All Might pulled out his phone and checked the time. Well, I'd best get going. Good night, young Midoriya, Mrs. Midoriya. Toshinori bowed and started walking off as the Midoriyas said goodbye. But he was suddenly back and was frantically searching through his pockets. Almost forgot where is it? Where is it? With a sigh of relief, he pulled out a couple of business cards and handed them to Izuku and Inko. If you ever want to talk. With that, Toshinori Yagi, better known as the number 1 hero, All Might, was off. Although neither of them knew it, Izuku and All Might had started something more magnificent than either could ever imagine. Izuku was prepared for a lot of things when All Might said he was going to turn him into the next symbol of peace. Of course, he had to bulk up, he was goddamn string bean for Pete's sake. However, that list did not include hauling garbage off a beach with his bare hands. Drenched in sweat, his muscles aching, burning and screaming like there was no tomorrow, Izuku collapsed onto the pavement. Oh God, I want to die. End my suffering, was the only thought coursing through Izuku's mind. Good work out there. An excellent first day of training, All Might said with a proud smile as he looked down at the exhausted boy. Killing me? Was all Izuku managed to wheeze out. Geez, this kid's in worse shape than I thought, All Might thought as he kneeled down next to him. Well, I could do that, or I could take you to Jinko's. After a moment, Izuku slowly and painfully lifted his arm off the pavement. Jinko's. That's the spirit. The booming voice of All Might's hero form reverberated across the beach as he picked up the green-haired boy and threw him in his rented pickup truck. Back in his true form, Toshinori sat across from Izuku in the same booth at Jinko's they'd sat at last week, and was still amazed at the amount of food the kid could pack away. His one plate of pork and vegetable yakisoba seemed pretty pitiful compared to the 6 plates of food Izuku had in front of him. Izuku put down the bowl of katsudon he just finished and gave Toshinori the brightest smile he could muster. Thanks for bringing me here again, Yagi. Well, I've got to keep you fed, young Midoriya. If you want those muscles you'll need to start eating more than you're used to, Toshinori explained. Oh, that reminds me, Izuku said as pulled out the all-American dream plan Toshinori had given. Are you sure I'll be ready for the entrance exam if I follow this? Honestly, I'm not quite sure, Toshinori said, rubbing the back of his neck. I mean, I'll have you ready for UACE entrance exam, guaranteed. But with how much food your body needs, it'll be a bit of trial and error before we have a finalized plan. He pointed to the paper Izuku was holding. What you're holding is more of a tentative schedule, not the final plan. Izuku nodded and dug back into his food. Oh, almost forgot. Toshinori exclaimed as he went rummaging through his pockets while Izuku gave him a perplexed stare. He pulled out a stack of yen and slid them over the boy. This is for you. Izuku screamed, nearly choking on his food. The other diners sent varied looks his way, a mixture of glares, looks of worry, and surprise. Izuku, with a rather abashed look on his face, looked at the other patrons and mouthed an apology. He turned back to Toshinori with wide, disbelieving eyes. Biba, why are you I can't just dash at that moment? Izuku's brain short-circuited and he started talking in circles. He just kept going and going and going, there was no end in sight to his ramblings. It was, quite frankly, freaking Toshinori the F out. After a good 30 seconds of this, he finally decided to put a stop to it. Jesus Christ, kid! Will you shut up? Toshinori screamed at the top of his lungs. While it did have the desired effect of essentially restarting Izuku's brain, he had also drawn the ire of the rest of restaurant. Toshinori looked around sheepishly, the other patrons giving him death glares and odd looks. Red in the face, he apologized and turned back to Izuku. Do not misunderstand me, young Midoriya, Toshinori began. This isn't meant to be a present, it's grocery money. With your training and conditioning, you'll need to eat even more than you do currently, and I don't wish to burden your family with an even larger food bill. It's my responsibility as your mentor to do this for you. Izuku stared at Toshinori with starry eyes before he gave an affirmative nod and took the money. Thank you, thank you, Yagi. They smiled at each other for a moment before a thought struck Izuku. Hold on, he said quizzically as he looked the wad of yen in his left hand. How am I going to explain this extra money to my mom? Toshinori was silent for a moment, and then he quite literally exploded. Goddammit, I hadn't thought of that. He screamed with an accompanying spray of blood gushing from his mouth. A pair of fists slammed down on the table, and the two jumped back in shock. It was the same waitress who had served them last time. Her name tag read Yum, and she was sessed off. Do I need to kick the two of you out? Theoretically, that was supposed to be a question, it wasn't. It was a threat. And no, frantically exclaimed Toshinori. We'll behave, Izuku said tearfully. In the blink of an eye, Yum's face went from demonic and intimidating to sweet and cheerful. Great, she said, her voice chipper and a smile on her face. I think I just saw my life flash before my eyes, Izuku said as slumped into his seat in a cold sweat. You and me both, kid. Toshinori crossed his arms over his chest. We still need a way to explain the extra money to your mom. He sat contemplatively while Izuku ate contemplatively. Suddenly, like lightning, They looked at each other, struck by the same idea. A job? Inko asked, sitting across from Toshinori, her son between them. Yes, I want to offer young Midoriya a position as my assistant, Toshinori explained. Really, it would be more of a mentorship. He's a very bright and dedicated young man who would be an asset to anyone he works for. It would also provide valuable life experience going forward into high school and beyond. To say Inko was surprised would be an understatement. Just a week ago this man walked into her and her son's lives after a chance meeting, and now he wanted to offer her son a job. Don't get her wrong, Toshinori seemed like a very nice man to her. He was polite, if a bit awkward, earnest, and genuinely appeared to like Izuku. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, might be the best way to put it. What exactly would Izuku be doing for you? She asked. Young Midoriya would be my personal assistant, a gopher if you will, Toshinori explained. He would run errands, deliver documents, and get coffee, those sorts of thing. Toshinori felt very warm and genuine to her that he genuinely liked her son and wanted to take Izuku under his wing. It was incredible to finally find anyone who saw past Izuku's lack of a quirk to see her son for himself. But Inko couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't seeing the whole picture. Well, I'm not sure, Inko said. Izuku's so busy with school, and I want him to get into a good high school, and dash. Please, Mom, Izuku pleaded with his hands clasped in front of him. Inko, stunned at Izuku's boldness, gazed at her son and Toshinori as they looked at her expectantly. Izuku, she spoke softly. You really want to do this? The green-haired boy nodded. More than anything, he said with the brightest smile he could muster. And that's what broke her. She couldn't do. Inko couldn't sit here and crush her son's dreams like before. Like what had come to be the biggest regret of her life. She sighed and sank into her chair before offering up a smile to Izuku and Toshinori. All right, Izuku, you can take the job. Wahoo! Izuku quite literally jumped for joy. He started talking animatedly with Toshinori as Inko watched on. Seeing her son happy like this, really, truly happy, was what gave Inko's life meaning. That smile on Izuku's filled her heart with a type of happiness that was hard to put into words. I can't believe I was worried, Inko thought as she got to prepare dinner. She offered Toshinori a chance to stay for dinner which he gladly accepted. I'm just too used to it. I'm sure this will great for Izuku. Inko decided to chalk her misgiving up to years of non-stop fretting over her son. Besides, what's the worst that could happen to the assistant to a secretary? It had been just over a month since Izuku had begun training with All Might, and he was getting better, to say the least. All Might hadn't been expecting any miracles, but it still shocked him at how much a twig Izuku was when they began. Despite that, All Might couldn't help but smile at the boy as hefted a microwave off the beach. Izuku panted as the sun rose high into the sky above them. You're doing great, kid, All Might said as he ran over to Izuku. He gave the boy a firm pat on the back. Izuku gave him a worn-out grin back. We'll break for lunch in an hour, okay? Lunch, Izuku though dreamily at the mention of the word. He vigorously shook his head. I can't get distracted, I've still got a lot due. Okay. Izuku shouted with an affirmative nod. Excellent, and in the meantime, All Might said as he reached into his pockets and pulled out half a dozen bars wrapped in brightly colored foil. Energy bars. Can't work out when you're collapsed on the ground. Izuku greedily snatched them out of All Might's hands and started devouring the first bar wrapped in blue foil. Thank you, All Might, thank you, I'll get back to work right now. Izuku said as he stuffed the balled-up wrapper in his pocket and ran back to the beach. All Might chuckled as he watched Izuku work out with an energy bar hanging halfway out of his mouth. This kid's something else, he thought as pulled out an energy bar wrapped in red foil for himself. And watching him eat makes me hungry. Toshinori had noticed he had more of an appetite that past month, and while he couldn't wolf down food like he used to, it was great to finally be able to keep down more than a few bites of food at a time. Cameras flashed, and reporters shouted as everyone and their mother crowded behind a line of police tape as 5 villains were loaded into a police van. A cacophony of people shouting All Might nearly drowned out the number 1 hero's conversation with the police officer. After saying goodbye to the officers and giving a wave to the cameras, All Might leaped into the air. He landed on top of a secluded, and after a quick scan to make sure nobody was around, he deflated in a cloud of steam. "Goddamn," he exclaimed as stretched his aching muscles. "I used up all my time in one go, can't seem to catch a break," he thought as reached for his phone. "Let's see how far it is to the train station, maybe I can make in time to dash." His train of thought was brought to an abrupt halt as finally saw the time. 3:15 p.m. All Might's body shook as he stared at the screen, nearly dropping his phone to the ground. "No effing way. 15 minutes. Toshinori screamed as he sat on an examination table in his underwear. "I gained 15 minutes. "I heard you the first time," Recovery Girl said, rather annoyed. "And just because it's after hours, it doesn't mean you get to yell at the top of your lungs." Toshinori shrank into himself and sheepishly rubbed the back of his neck. Sorry." Recovery Girl sighed as she looked at the results of Toshinori's tests. "So, you're absolutely sure your time limit has increased?" "As I said, I transformed at noon, on that, and didn't change back until 3, even if I was off by a couple of minutes, I know for a fact my time limit still increased." Her eyes scanned her clipboard. "Well, that makes sense. You're healthier overall since the last time I saw you, your weight's increased, your blood cell count is up, and you aren't as deficient in vitamins and minerals as you were before." Toshinori smirked. "You're not calling me fat, are you?" Recovery Girl raised her cane to smack him. I'm sorry. Toshinori hastily apologized. He sighed in relief as she lowered her cane and looked back at the chart in her hands. "Look, I'm not complaining about being healthier, but I just want to know why. Clearly you've made some change to your routine that's having a positive impact on your health," Recovery Girl said before she looked up at Toshinori. "Whatever it is, keep it up. At this rate, you'll start to resemble a healthy human being in a few months." "But that's the thing," the blonde man began as he leaned forwards. "I haven't changed anything. My routine's the same as it's always been." "And by routine, you mean being stupid, overworking yourself, and doing a shit job of taking care of yourself in general." Toshinori didn't have a response for that. "People don't just become healthier out of nowhere," she said as she went to her computer. "Think hard, All Might, you've clearly been doing something new or different, even if you haven't realized it." "I'm honest to God trying to think of something, but Toshinori's voice trailed off as realization slowly dawned on his face. Recovery Girl raised an eyebrow at the tall man. "Young Midoriya," Toshinori exclaimed, his voice barely a whisper. "Here," she said, befuddled. It was a clear, warm Saturday morning as Izuku jogged to Dagobah Municipal Beach Park, ready to start his training for the day. It was quiet, the only sounds were the chirping of birds and his own footsteps. Slowly, the beach came into view, and alongside it was Toshinori standing next to his truck, waiting for him. "All Might!" Izuku cried out as broke into a run. Toshinori turned and waved at him. "Young Midoriya, good morning." He came into a stop in front of the number 1 hero, panting slightly. "I'm ready to go, what do you want me to start with?" Izuku said as he looked around animatedly. "Actually," Toshinori said, catching Izuku off guard. "We're doing something different today." He pointed his thumb at the truck. "Hop in, and we'll get going." Confused, Izuku's only response was an okay as he climbed into the passenger seat. Toshinori started up the car, and they were off. As Toshinori drove, it wasn't long before Izuku felt his eyelids grow heavy and he fell asleep. He wasn't sure how long he slept, but Izuku was awoken by a hand rocking him back and forth. "Hey, kid, we're here." Izuku slowly opened his eyes, yawned, and stretched. As rubbed the sleep out his eyes, Izuku looked out the windshield to see. "UA!" He screamed in shock as the school of his dreams towered over him. Izuku was so surprised he didn't even notice Toshinori had gotten out of the car until he opened the passenger door for him. "What are you waiting for? Come on," Toshinori said, bringing Izuku back to reality. "Alright." Izuku scrambled out of the car as fast he could, closing the door behind him. "Here," Toshinori said as he pulled something out of his pocket and handed it to Izuku. The object was a lanyard with a card that read UA Guest Pass attached to it. You'll need to put this on to get into the school. Izuku put it on without a word and followed Toshinori to the school's gate. There, as Toshinori continued forward, Izuku stopped dead in tracks. He looked upon the massive building in awe, its polished windows glimmering in the daylight. This is incredible, Izuku thought as his mind raced with the names of countless pro-heroes who called UA High their alma mater. I'm actually going to step inside UA. With his body shaking with a combination of nerves and excitement, Izuku finally mustered the resolve and stepped beyond the gate and onto the grounds of UA. It was then and there that Izuku let out a yell of pure fanboyish joy. Oh my god, 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 oh my god. His mouth seemed to switch to autopilot while his body quite started vibrating with excitement, overwhelmed by what was happening. I can't believe it. This is really happening. I'm standing inside UA. This is a dream come true-eyed. Izuku's train of thought was brought to an abrupt halt when he finally noticed Toshinori standing at the door with a huge, somewhat mischievous grin on his face. The green-haired boy bolted for the front door to stand next to his mentor. Izuku turned bright red with embarrassment as rubbed the back of his neck, all the while that grin never left the blond man's face. Sorry, All Might, Izuku muttered. It's fine, young Midoriya, Toshinori said as he opened the door and walked inside, Izuku following him. To tell you the truth, I had a pretty similar reaction my first time here. I'll never forget the first time I laid eyes on this place. Still red in the face, Izuku couldn't help but smile at his mentor's words. After that, the two walked in silence through the halls, Izuku taking in everything he could. He noted the, quite frankly, obscenely large doors the school had and couldn't help but raise an eyebrow at them. Must be for students with mutant quirks that make them really big, Izuku thought absent-mindedly. They eventually reached a normal-sized door. Toshinori knocked, and a voice said, "Come in." He opened the door to reveal UA's nurse's office and said nurse was sitting at her desk. She turned in her swivel chair to look at her guests. "Good morning, All Might. How are you?" she said with a smile. "What?" Izuku thought as he went white as a sheet and stiff as a board. "It's okay, young Midoriya," Toshinori said as he placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. "She knows about One for All and myself." Izuku instantly relaxed at Toshinori's words, letting out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Toshinori coughed lightly to get Izuku's attention and gestured to the nurse. "Young Midoriya, I'd like to introduce you to a friend and colleague of mine. Recovery girl," Izuku said, interrupting Toshinori. "You're the youthful heroine, Recovery girl," he offered a shallow bow before continuing. "It's an honor to meet you. I've read all about you." Now, there's no need to bow," Recovery Girl said as she hopped off her chair. She walked over to Izuku and offered a hand. "And you must be Izuku Midoriya, you're such a polite young man. It's no wonder All Might picked you as his successor." Izuku blushed at Recovery Girl's kind words. Thank you." "Now," Recovery Girl said as she pointed her cane at one of the examination tables. "I'll need you stripped down to your underwear, and we can get started." "I'm sorry, what?" Izuku blinked in surprise while Toshinori and Recovery stared at him. "Hold on, I'm confused, what are we doing here exactly?" There was a beat, silence, and then, "Goddammit, I forgot." Toshinori screamed in a spray of blood. "Idiot," Recovery Girl smacked the back of his head with her cane. "Why didn't you tell him why you brought him here?" "I meant to, I really did," Toshinori explained defensively. "I was going to tell him during the drive over, but then he fell asleep, and I didn't want to wake him up, and when we got here Stop!" Recovery Girl snapped. She pinched the bridge of her nose and took a deep breath, then turned to Izuku. "I'm so sorry for All Might, Midoriya, he can be a real dunderhead at times." Toshinori was about to retort, but a quick glare from Recovery Girl shut him up. "Anyway, we're just here to do a physical, check your vitals, and see how your training's been going," Recovery Girl said with a smile. "Okay, but please don't laugh," Izuku said with a bright red face. Toshinori and Recovery Girl were perplexed by his statement until he undressed to reveal his All Might boxers beneath his shorts. Recovery Girl took it in stride. She'd seen her fair share of students in licensed pro-hero underwear. Toshinori, on the other hand, was busy bent over wheezing and clutching his sides at the sight of his apprentice's choice in undergarments. "Oh my god, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't even know they made them for kids your age," he managed to squeeze out through his fit of laughter. Recovery Girl gave him a swift hit with her cane and a disapproving glare and then got to work on giving Izuku his physical. After checking Izuku's height, weight, and vitals, Recovery Girl sat in her chair, clipboard in hand. "All in all, you're a very healthy young man," she said as she looked over her notes. Izuku smiled awkwardly. "Thank you. And All Might says you have quite the appetite." "Yes. And that you're quirkless." Izuku said nothing as he stared down at his feet, downcast. "Oh, I'm so sorry dear," Recovery Girl said regretfully as she realized her mistake. "I can't believe I said that so carelessly, please forgive me if I hurt you." "No, it's fine." Izuku's voice was small and somber. "I've had to live with it since I was 4. I'm used to it. Still, this world can be a cruel place for people who are different. First it was people with quirks, and now it's people without them." Recovery Girl walked over to him with sympathetic eyes. "I can't imagine what it was like when they called with the test results." "Test results?" Izuku said, confused. Recovery Girl raised an eyebrow at him. "The results of the lab tests, to determine if you had a quirk or not." "Well, they didn't have to call, they showed me and my mom the X-ray dash." "Wait," Recovery Girl said, a dangerous edge to her voice. "Are you telling me that all they did? The only thing they did was take an X-ray of your foot to look for the superfluous joint? They didn't take a blood or saliva sample to perform a gene test?" At this point, she was literally shaking with rage. Izuku nervously turned to Toshinori and mouthed help, but all the tall man did was shrug. Yes," Izuku squeaked. For a moment, Recovery Girl was completely still, the rage gone from her form. "Those idiots!" Until she threw her clipboard against the ground with a scream of unadulterated hate and fury. "I can't believe they let this happen. What's this world coming to if doctors won't do their jobs? I swear, if I get my hands on whoever X-rayed you I'll wring their dash." "Excuse me." Recovery Girl came down from her rage to see Izuku and Toshinori literally quaking fear. Izuku had his hand raised, as if to ask a question. "I'm a little confused, why are you so upset?" Izuku said. Recovery Girl sighed and pinched the bridge of her nose. "Let me explain. While having the superfluous pinky joint means you are less likely to develop a quirk, it doesn't guarantee it. An estimated 30% of people with the joint develop a quirk, and an estimated 5% of people without the joint are quirkless." She walked over to pick up her cracked clipboard and picked it up. "To think, they didn't even consider doing a gene test. They should be arrested for malpractice and their licenses revoked." "Well, even if that is true, I'm pretty sure they were right," Izuku spoke somberly. "I tried, and tried as hard as I could when I was a kid, but I couldn't do anything close to my parents' quirks." He looked down at his feet, focusing in on his pinky toes. "I really am quirkless." The room was awkwardly silent for a moment before Toshinori spoke. "Actually, I'm not so sure." He walked over to Izuku, a serious expression on his face. "Young Midoriya, do remember the day we met when I told you about my 3-hour time limit?" Izuku nodded. "My boy, since I met you and started training you, my time limit has increased by 15 minutes, and I have become healthier overall. I believe that it is because of you, that you do have a quirk." Izuku could stare at him in stunned silence, agape at what he'd said. Hours later, Inko was busy preparing dinner in the Midoriya family's kitchen. Taking care of a child with as massive an appetite as Izuku wasn't easy, but seeing the food she made bring a smile to her son's face made it all worth it. She glanced up at the clock and noticed the late hour. Izuku should have been home by now. Is his job keeping him out? Inko's lips pressed into a thin line. While she certainly liked Mr. Yagi, working for him made Izuku happy, she couldn't help but worry when her son was away for extended periods of time. "I'm sure he's fine, but I'll give him a quick call just to be sure," Inko thought as she reached for her phone. Before she could get to her contacts, Inko heard the apartment's door open. "Mom, I'm home," she heard her son call out. She sighed. In relief. Thank goodness. Welcome home, sweetheart. Dinner will ready in about 20 minutes, Inko said. However, she heard a second pair of footsteps along with Izuku's. Inko turned to see Toshinori standing next to her son, a thick stack of papers in hand. Oh, Mr. Yagi, Inko greeted. Izuku didn't tell me you'd be coming. Would you like to stay for dinner? That would be excellent, Mrs. Midoriya, Toshinori replied with a smile, but his expression then turned very serious. However, there's an important matter, young Midoriya, and I need to discuss with you. Inko stood there for a moment, taken aback by Toshinori's dire tone. She turned to see Izuku standing rather awkwardly next to the tall man. I see, was all she said. Inko turned off the stove as Toshinori motioned for her take a seat at the table. He sat down directly across from her while Izuku sat between them. I guess I should start with, well, Toshinori began as tried to find the right words. I suppose you know that my physical health is not the best. Eh? Inko yelped. No, you look perfectly healthy. Izuku and Toshinori gave her strange looks. Inko gave out a forced laugh. Well, Inko said softly as she started twiddling her thumbs. If we're being honest, it looks like a stiff breeze could knock you over. She turned her eyes away from the blonde man. Maybe even a weak one. The two men gaped at Inko's bluntness. You're not wrong. Toshinori forced out as. Anyway, ever since I started spending time with your son, I've seen a significant improvement in my health, so I took him to a doctor I know. Doctor! Inko cried out in a panic. What's wrong with my baby? Is he going to be okay? What's dash? No. It's nothing like that, Mrs. Midoriya, Toshinori said in a frantic attempt to calm her down. In fact, it's the opposite. Your son is an exceptionally healthy young man. Inko immediately relaxed, clutching her still racing heart. It's just well, take a look for yourself, Toshinori said as he shoved the stack of papers into Inko's hands. She looked down to see. Well, frankly, she had absolutely no idea what she was looking at. It was medically related, obviously, but she couldn't make heads or tails of it. The papers were a mess of charts, graphs, and medical jargon she couldn't even begin to comprehend. I'm sorry, Inko said as she looked at Toshinori, completely lost. But, what am I looking at? He was opened his mouth to speak, but Mom was cut off by Izuku. Inko and Toshinori looked at Izuku, having spoken for the first time since the conversation began. He looked down at his lap, refusing to meet either adult's gaze. The doctor, she did some tests, and she found out that I. Izuku began, but fat tears started welling up in his eyes. Inko reached out a hand to comfort her son, then he looked at her and she stopped, and it was a moment that would burn itself into Inko's memories forever. A smile on Izuku's face was biggest, brightest, happiest smile Inko had ever seen in her entire life. Words couldn't begin to describe the pure elation Izuku radiated as fat tears of joy rolled down his cheeks. She had never seen her son this happy. It was awe-inspiring. Mom, I have a quirk. She couldn't reply as those words escaped Izuku's mouth. I have a quirk. I've always had quirk. Izuku brought up his hands to his try and control his tears. I have a quirk that heals people. Inko stood up so abruptly her chair clattered to the ground, but she didn't care. All she cared about right now was Izuku, her son, her sweetheart, her baby. Izuku, she screamed as she launched herself at her son and embraced him in a bone-crushing hug, her own eyes breaking into tears of joy. He said nothing as he hugged right back, his tears staining Inko's blouse. She didn't mind, the only thing that mattered to her right was her son. They weren't sure how long they stayed like that, embracing each other, crying the happiest tears they had ever known, but they didn't care. Izuku and Toshinori were busy scrubbing dishes from that night's dinner while Inko was making a call. She'd been on hold for a few minutes while the operator transferred her, but she was practically jumping up and down with excitement. I guess it makes sense, Izuku thought as he mechanically scrubbed a plate. This is really important news, of course, he needs to know. He looked back at his mother, a huge grin plastered on her face, although he couldn't help but feel she was also nervous and sad. But what do I say to him? I can't even remember the last time I talked to him. Izuku stared down at the plate in his hand, his reflection staring back at him. I can barely even remember what he looks like. Young Midoriya? He jumped at the sound of Toshinori's voice. Are you alright? The blonde man asked, a soap-covered sponge in hand. Oh, of course I'm alright. Why wouldn't I be? Izuku said as he gave a clearly forced smile. Toshinori gave him an incredulous look. Izuku gave a nervous laugh and went back to scrubbing dishes. The blonde man frowned but said nothing. The silence was awkward and heavy. After a brief but tense moment, Izuku sighed and relented. It's just that I'm nervous, okay? Toshinori raised an eyebrow. Nervous? Why? I thought you'd be excited. I know, but Izuku spoke softly, so as not to be heard by Inko. I can't remember the last time I talked to my dad. Toshinori stared at Izuku with wide eyes. He didn't speak. He didn't know what to say. After a moment of awkward silence, he finally did something. Toshinori placed a comforting hand on Izuku's shoulder and gave a reassuring smile. Hey, Toshinori said. It's going to be alright. Izuku stared at Toshinori, stunned, before offering back a smile of his own. Hisoshi! Inko's giddy voice cut through the air. Izuku and Toshinori stared at her as she practically vibrated with excitement. It's so good to talk to you, honey, Inko said. How are you? Inko went silent as Hisoshi spoke. Oh, we're doing just fine. In fact, Izuku has something to tell you. I'll hand you off to him now. His mother beckoned for him. Izuku walked over and tentatively took the phone from his giddy mother. He stared at it for a moment before swallowing air and finally held the phone up his ear. Dad! Izuku, is that you? A husky and shaky voice replied. Yeah, it's me. Hey, well you sound, different. Guess my little man's growing up. Why, it's been a while since we talked, Izuku said with a nervous chuckle. Why did I say that? You're right, it has been a long time. Probably too long. The line went silent as Izuku's voice died in his throat. Anyway, Hisoshi said with clearly forced enthusiasm. Why, your mom said you had something to tell me. What is it? Oh right, Izuku said, his voice suddenly back. First is that I got a job. A job? Yeah, I'm a gopher for Mr. Yagi. Who's Mr. Yagi? Izuku slapped himself on the forehead. Sorry, forget to tell you, Mr. Yagi is All Might's secretary. All Might's secretary? You're working for All Might's secretary. Uh-huh. That's amazing, kiddo. Izuku felt his ears ring at the high volume of his father's voice. How did you meet him? Did you get the job today? What's the pay like? Have you met the big man himself? Hisoshi's rapid-fire questions were making Izuku's head spin. Is this what I sound like to people? I met him by accident, really, Izuku explained. There was a villain attack and he was on the scene with All Might. We got to talking after that and he offered me the job a week later. He made sure to omit the part where he was involved in the attack. I've been working for Mr. Yagi for about a month. He pays me 1,600 yen an hour. Izuku's eye lit up as he spoke. And he introduced me to All Might and I got his autograph. Izuku couldn't contain his squeal of fanboyish joy at the mention of the autograph. He blushed, realizing what he'd just done. Sorry, I got carried away. Hisoshi chuckled warmly. Hey, it's all right. I'm so happy for you, Izuku. Anyway, I've got to get back to work. We'll talk. Wait. Don't hang up, Izuku said frantically. There's something else I need to tell you, something important. Okay, what is it? He took a deep breath, mentally preparing himself for what he was about to say. Dad, I have a quirk. The line went dead silent. Izuku couldn't even hear his father breathing. Dad! What? His voice was so loud, Izuku was sure his mother and Toshinori heard him. I don't understand. When? Why? How? Well, the doctor never performed the gene test to see if I had plus alpha markers, they only checked my toe joints, Izuku explained. And the other day, I went to see a doctor and she did some tests, and turns out I've always had a quirk. Okay then, so did you get mine or your mom's? Or is it a mix? Hisoshi suddenly sounded very excited. Here? What do you owe? You mean my quirk, Izuku said. Neither, it's actually a mutation. A mutation, that's incredible. Those are supposed to be super rare, what is it? It is, and that's why we didn't figure it out until now, Izuku said. It's a type of healing quirk. My body passively radiates energy that heals myself and everyone around me, that's why I've always had such a big appetite. Healing. That's amazing, what are you calling it? I actually haven't come up with a name for it yet. Well, make sure to call me when you do. Izuku smiled. I will. I've got to get back to work, but there's one more thing I need to say. What is it? Izuku, I'm proud of you, you make so happy to be your dad. Taken aback, Izuku wasn't sure what to say. I really need to go now, promise we'll talk. We will. Bye, Dad. Bye, Izuku. As Hisoshi hung up the phone, Izuku couldn't help but find himself crying tears of joy for the second time that night. He turned to his mother and Toshinori and smiled. While Saturday was probably one of the greatest days of Izuku's life, the following Monday was proving to be less than stellar, to say the least. Why ha ha ha? Izuku's classmates roared with laughter as the green-haired boy sat at his desk, body shaking and tears at the corners of his eyes. You expect us to believe you magically got a quirk over the weekend? A boy with large, shark-like teeth screeched. Get real. Do you really think we're dumb enough to fall for that? A girl with brown hair and horns coming out of the sides of her head sneered. Did little quirkless Midoriya hit his head on the way to school? It's the truth. Izuku yelled as he stood up. I do have a quirk, and I didn't just get it over the weekend, I've always had it. Even though he was trying to be brave, Izuku's voice still shook and his knees wobbled. Oh yeah, another boy said as his fingers extended. Then how come you've never used it before? He punctuated the question by forcefully poking Izuku's forehead. I told you, Izuku managed to force out, holding back his tears. My quirk's a mutation. I only found out about it on Saturday. Really? Another girl with blue prehensile hair said mockingly as she leaned forward. Then why don't you show this quirk of yours? Well, the thing is, Izuku muttered. It's a healing quirk, and I haven't had the chance to practice using it, and dash. I knew it, the first boy yelled. You're lying. You're still the same quirkless loser you've always been. The four students burst into a fit of cruel laughter as hot tears ran down Izuku's cheeks, unable to hold back the floodgates anymore. I'm not. Izuku tried to force out the word, but his tears wouldn't allow him to speak. I'm not a sniff, I'm not a. All right, that's enough. The teacher said he finished writing on the chalkboard. Class is about to start, so settle down and take your seats. He turned to look directly at Izuku. And Midoriya, you shouldn't make a habit of lying. Now sit down or I'll have you stand out in the hall. The four other students went to their desks, leaving Izuku to futilely try and wipe away the tears pouring out of his eyes. The teacher paid him no mind. A few desks away, Katsuki Bakugo sat with his feet planted squarely on his desk. While you wouldn't guess from posture or demeanor, he'd been intently listening to Izuku's exchange with their classmates, or as Bakugo called them, extras, and watching them out of the corner of his eye. Bakugo glanced back at Izuku's crying, trembling form one last time before turning his attention squarely on the chalkboard and the teacher in front of it. Nerd had it coming, Bakugo thought, his face fiercely neutral. What did he think would happen, saying he's suddenly got a quirk? As the rest of the class snickered at Izuku's tears, Bakugo could only scowl. Idiots. This is why you're all extras, you pay attention to little sheets like Deku. I can't afford to get caught up in with him, he'd only drag me down. That's what Bakugo told himself at least. About a month ago, Bakugo had realized that interacting with Izuku at all was waste of his time, so he'd started avoiding the green-haired boy completely. It was only a coincidence that his epiphany came the same day he got attacked by the sludge villain. He didn't owe Izuku anything, and he certainly hadn't stopped bullying him as a way to repay Izuku for saving him, because Bakugo hadn't needed saving, and certainly not by the likes of Izuku. As the teacher started their morning lesson, Izuku finally managed to rein in his emotions, hold back his tears. His eyes still red, Izuku looked up at the teacher and then around the room. Of course, they didn't believe me, Izuku thought as pulled out his school notebook from his bag. They've got no reason to. I've always been the quirkless kid. Why would that change overnight? Izuku tried to concentrate on the lesson, but he couldn't focus through his bleary eye. I just wish I could. He looked at his desk, remembering old Dera Junior High used lift-lid desks. Prove it to them. He suddenly got an idea, a very bad, very stupid idea. But if it worked, Izuku would prove he had a quirk. Izuku put his school supplies back in his bag and stood up, his chair screeching in response. Every eye in the classroom focused in on him. The teacher groaned. Midoriya, what did I say about dash? But Izuku wasn't listening. He lifted the desk's lid as high as he could and placed his left pointer finger squarely on the metal frame. His teacher and classmates stared at him, bewildered. Izuku took a deep breath and then brought the lid down with as much force as he could muster. Everyone screamed, Izuku in pain and everyone else in shock. Holy F dash! One student cried. Izuku grit his teeth and brought the lid down again, but managed to contain his screams. The teacher stared at him, dumbfounded at what he was doing. Emma Midoriya, what the hell are you doing? Izuku didn't answer his question and instead brought the lid up once more. I. Slam. Slam. Not. Slam. A. Slam. Liar. Slam. 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 Izuku brought the lid down on his finger one last before he pulled it out of the desk. He held up his left arm to reveal a bleeding, bashed, broken purple finger. Izuku was breathing heavily, almost delirious with pain. The classroom was silent, all eyes on him. Izuku took a deep breath to steady himself and concentrated on the power he knew he had. I know it's there, somewhere. All I have to do dash. Suddenly, Izuku began to glow. He was enveloped by a vibrant green aura that grew brighter and brighter as the seconds passed. Bring it to the surface. Izuku glowed so bright the classroom was blinded. Everyone was forced to shield their eyes. When the light faded, the class looked and saw Izuku standing at his desk panting like he'd just run a marathon, and clutching a perfectly healthy finger. He looked at all his classmates, and then the teacher, a triumphant smile on his tired face. See? I told you, I had a quirk. Izuku collapsed, hitting his desk with a resounding thud. Holy F dash! Stop saying that! The teacher screamed. He pointed to the student who'd just spoken. Run to the nurse and tell her Midoriya collapsed. Right away, he said, bolting out of the classroom. You too, the teacher said, pointing to two students sitting next to Izuku. Help me carry Midoriya to the nurse's office. They nodded and took an arm each while the teacher grabbed Izuku's legs. As all of this was happening, the rest of the class looked on in stunned silence. Everyone had the same gaping expression on their faces as Izuku was hauled to the nurse's office. Except one. Bakugo stared at Izuku's unconscious body with eyes drowning in rage and fury. His body shook as he grit his teeth. Bakugo's hands gripped his desk so hard his knuckles turned bone white. It was a miracle he hadn't crushed the desk or blown it to smithereens. Deku, he thought, blocking out his classmates' chatter. I'm going to effing murder you, you fat, lying nerd. As Izuku walked home from school, he couldn't help but smile. Sure, he'd collapsed from actively using his quirk for the first time, but was it worth it to show everyone how wrong they were? Although he was embarrassed by the fact he'd eaten Nurse Ito's bento after he woke up, and then went on to scarf down her jar of lollipops she kept for students. He'd apologized profusely and promised to bring her a bento and a new jar of lollipops tomorrow. Still, Izuku felt on top of the world, nothing could bring him down. Deku! Izuku couldn't even make a sound before someone grabbed his collar and shoved him against a wall. He was disoriented, but Izuku knew immediately who it was: Bakugo. His wits returning, Izuku opened his eyes to see Bakugo, his face contorted into a ferocious mask of rage and contempt. I've never seen Kaken this mad, Izuku thought, trembling and sweating under Bakugo's gaze. What the hell happened to him? Kaken, Izuku stuttered out. What are you dash? Shut up, you fat nerd. Bakugo growled. Izuku froze, silent. How long? Bakugo said, his voice low and cold. How long have been lying to me, you bastard? Kaken, I don't know what you're talking about, Izuku blurted out. Quirkless, Bakugo said, confusing Izuku. You said we're quirkless. But you've had a quirk this whole time, you little sheet stain. Bakugo started screaming in Izuku's face, his eyes burning and hostile. I thought I was quirkless too, I really did, Izuku squeaked, his voice drenched in fear. I only found out I had quirk on Saturday, I don't even have a name for it. He was sweating bullets and trembling worse than he ever had before, but Bakugo's grip remained ironclad. It was quiet for a moment, not even the birds were chirping. Bakugo took a deep breath. Fine, he spat, letting go of Izuku. The green-haired boy dropped to the ground. Keep lying, keep telling everyone that shitty story, you fat nerd, Bakugo growled as looked down at Izuku in disgust. But I know the truth. Bakugo stepped back and walked away, leaving Izuku shaking on the ground. After a few paces, he stopped and turned around. Don't think this changes anything. Quirk or no quirk, you're still Deku, always have been, always will be. He finally walked off, leaving Izuku alone. Izuku curled up in a ball, tears poking at the corners of his eyes. He pulled out a granola bar and started eating, but it tasted like nothing. DMN it. He comes home and tells me collapsed at school from using his quirk. I can hardly believe it, Inko said, pointing her chopsticks at Toshinori. I swear, every week he finds a new reason to make me worry. Mom, Izuku whined, chopsticks halfway between his plate and his mouth. Don't say it like that. It's embarrassing. His face turned bright red, and Toshinori's giggles weren't helping. I'm sorry, young Midoriya, Toshinori said with a grin. But she's right, you always seem to be doing something to fret over. Izuku turned bright red while Inko and Toshinori laughed. Inko took a moment to look around the table, appreciate this moment. Izuku sat across from her while Toshinori sat between them to her left and Izuku's right. Despite his embarrassment, Inko knew Izuku was happy. It was certainly an improvement from earlier. When her son had arrived home from school today, Inko knew something was wrong. Izuku had been subdued, seemed to be the best way to put it. It felt as though Izuku had been holding something in, something he didn't want to let out. Inko tried asking him what was wrong, but he smiled and said he was fine, then went to his room. Izuku kept things from her. Inko knew that. She'd known that for a long time. She wasn't stupid. Inko knew her son was bullied. She knew how cruel children could be, both intentionally and unintentionally. She tried to get Izuku to open up about what went on when she wasn't around, but he never did. Instead, she decided to be his rock, to always support him in whatever he wanted to do. When he walked into his room, Inko decided to go whatever she could to make her son happy. The first step was katsudon, Izuku's favorite food. Of course, Izuku loved all sorts of food, but katsudon was cut above the rest for him. It never failed to improve his mood when they had it for dinner. The second step was Toshinori. Even they'd only met a month ago, Toshinori and Izuku had formed a very strong bond. The man gave her son hope, something Inko felt like she'd failed at. She invited him over under the pretense that being around Izuku was good for his physical health. While true, the real reason she'd invited him was that being around Toshinori was good for Izuku's mental health. Although even as Izuku and Toshinori talked about their days had been, Inko couldn't stop herself from worrying. With Izuku meeting Toshinori, getting a job as a gopher, his sudden interest in working out and bodybuilding, and the discovery of his quirk, it had all done wonders for her son's self-confidence, but it didn't feel quite right. This all felt too sudden to be a coincidence. and she still had trouble believing Izuku was balancing school, his job, and his workout routine. Inko felt like she was missing something, some piece of this puzzle that would make everything clear as day, and she knew Izuku had it. "Mom," Izuku said. "Are you okay?" Snapping out of her musings, Inko realized she'd acquired a rather worried look on her face. "Oh me, I'm fine," she said lightly. "I was just wondering if you're going to start collapsing on a regular basis. I'm not sure my heart could take it if you did." Izuku blanched while Toshinori erupted into a fit of giggles. Inko smiled as they argued good-naturedly over her statement. "I suppose it's all right for now," she thought warmly. "He's kept secrets before, and whatever it is, it makes my baby happy." And so, Inko decided not to pry, at least not yet. Later in the evening, in another part of Musutafu, Chiyo Shuzenji, better known as Recovery Girl, was busy cleaning up after her dinner. Dressed in a white shirt and grey sweatpants, she just finished washing the dishes and placing them on the drying rack. Suddenly, her cell phone rang. Recovery Girl looked at the clock. Who could it be at this hour, she thought. Recovery Girl looked the caller ID and sighed in annoyance. Of course. "Hello, All Might," she said as she answered the phone. "Good evening, Recovery Girl, sorry to disturb you at such a late hour." "It's fine," Recovery Girl said as she walked from the kitchen to her office. "Did you overdo it again and need to see me?" "What? No!" Toshinori exclaimed, rather offended. Believe it or not, it was young Midoriya. He used his quirk at school and ended up collapsing. He's fine now, but it's concerning. Recovery Girl groaned and pinched the bridge of her nose. "I swear, that boy is too similar to you for his own good. Bring him to me tomorrow and I'll look him over." "Thank you. Good night, Recovery Girl." "Good night, All Might." Recovery Girl hung up. As she put her phone back in her pocket, Recovery Girl looked her desk, covered in papers. She picked up the file of one Yuma Tsubasa, the quirkologist whom wrongly diagnosed Izuku as quirkless. How on earth, she thought as pored over the file. Does a professional quirkologist simply forget to perform a DNA test? It's standard procedure. After Izuku had told Recovery Girl about how his doctor had failed to perform the DNA, she'd immediately requested, or rather demanded, to get their names so she could have their license revoked. While Izuku had been happy to provide her with Dr. Tsubasa's name, he'd also told her that he was unfortunately no longer with us. Abducted along with his grandson, Sora, on a shopping trip, she thought she pulled out the police reports she'd printed out. Suspects found and convicted, but no bodies ever recovered. Both presumed dead. She noted the date when the missing persons report was filed, the day after All Might's fight with All for One. Someone, no, a monster with the power to steal quirks is killed in a fight to the death, and the very next day a quirkologist disappears into thin air, not a trace of him or his grandson to be found. Recovery Girl's brow furrowed as she looked at every document regarding Yuma Tsubasa she'd managed to dig up. This has to be a coincidence, it has to be. But she pulled out a bottle and a glass from the bottom drawer of her desk and poured herself a glass of whiskey. Something's not right. I can feel it in my bones, Recovery Girl thought grimly, sipping on her nightcap. Izuku stared at Recovery Girl. Recovery Girl stared at Izuku. He felt himself sweating as he sat in UA's nurse's office after hours, brought at the behest of Recovery Girl after Izuku had collapsed yesterday. Is she going to say anything? Izuku thought as he felt as though Recovery Girl was staring at his very soul. It wasn't a pleasant feeling. "So," she began, looking over her clipboard. "You collapsed yesterday." "That's right," Izuku mumbled out, his body shaking. He briefly looked at Toshinori, who was standing off to the side, as if to ask for help. All he did was give Izuku a sympathetic look. "All Might told me it was from overexerting your quirk." Recovery Girl had a dangerous look in her eye as she spoke. "What prompted this?" Izuku swallowed air, his chest tight and heart pounding. "I broke my finger." Her eyes narrowed. "How?" Izuku looked at Toshinori again, but the blonde was shaking just as much as him. "Jammed it in a desk," he managed to squeak out. Recovery Girl's glare only intensified. "On purpose," Izuku said as if Recovery Girl had managed to reach into his brain and force the truth out. The room went deathly quiet and still, the tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Recovery girl sighed, all tension leaving her body. Oh, thank goodness, Izuku thought as he finally relaxed. You idiot, she screamed as whacked him upside the head with her cane. Oh! Izuku cried out, clutching the top of his head. He looked at Recovery Girl with tears at the corners of his eyes. Why would you do that? You're a doctor. That's exactly why I hit you, she yelled, scowling. I diagnosed you with stupid and prescribed you a cane beating. Best cure for it I have. She turned to Toshinori, who at this point had turned white as a sheet. First you and now him. Honestly, do I need to tie you both down to stop you from injuring yourselves? Toshinori laughed nervously as his eyes darted to the ceiling. Recovery Girl sighed as she pinched the bridge of her nose. She turned to a still stunned Izuku. In any event, we can't have you passing out like this again. You need to learn how to control your quirk. Her expression became far more serious as she spoke. Izuku was taken aback by her sudden change in tone but nodded in agreement nonetheless. Right, he said, voice filled with determination. Izuku's face fell as was struck with a sudden realization. But how am I supposed to do that? Everyone else had their whole lives to figure out how their quirks work. I've only got 9 months until UACE entrance exams. Actually, we've got an idea, Toshinori said, catching Izuku's attention. Recovery Girl and I were talking this morning, and we decided it would be a good idea for you to train with her to master your quirk. You'll split your time between your physical training with me and training your quirk with Recovery Girl. But that'll cut into my training for one for all. Izuku said in a panic. I'm already on a time crunch to get my body ready for one for all. There's no way I'll be ready for the exam if I try and do both. Calm down, Recovery Girl said soothingly. There's no need to worry. Just let us explain. Embarrassed, Izuku quickly muttered an apology and let them speak. Now, do you know how you build muscle? Recovery Girl asked. Izuku thought for a moment and said he didn't. Well, to put it simply, you build muscle by tearing them and letting them heal, she explained. When you tear your muscle fibers, they knit themselves back together stronger than before. Your body passively radiates energy that heals yourself and those around you, thus accelerating this process. That's awesome, Izuku beamed. But how can you be sure? Because I've seen it in action, Toshinori interjected. I didn't say anything earlier because I wasn't sure, but you're actually ahead of schedule on your training routine. I realized it after talking with Recovery Girl this morning. You keep this up and you'll have plenty of time to spare. Toshinori smiled at his protégé. Izuku couldn't help but smile back at his mentor, a sudden warmth filling his chest. Right, I'll work hard to master my quirk before UACE entrance exam. Recovery Girl couldn't help but crack a smile. Alongside them. She then looked at the clock and noticed the time. It's getting late, you should be getting home, she said, turning to Izuku. Oh, right, he said as looked at the clock. I don't want my mom to start worrying again. He jumped off the bed and started gathering his things. I'd better hurry if I want to catch the train home. Actually, why don't I just drive you home? Toshinori offered. Are you sure? Izuku asked sheepishly. You can just drive me to the station. I don't want to be any trouble. Hey, it's no trouble at all, young Midoriya, the tall man replied. Besides, it gives me an excuse to stay for dinner. Toshinori grinned. Izuku chuckled and accepted the offer. As the two left Recovery Girl's office, her face fell. She looked at her desk where Yuma Tsubosa's file laid, her face tight and tense. The following week at school was proving to be rather uneventful by all accounts. After the initial shock from Monday had worn off, all of Izuku's classmates had returned to their normal routine of ignoring the green-haired boy. Not even Bakugo paid him any mind, going back to acting as if Izuku didn't exist after confronting him about his quirk on Monday. Makes sense, I guess, Izuku thought as he walked through the halls with his 8-tier bento in hand. Nothing's really changed, so there's no reason for them to just start being nice to me. It didn't really bother him. Izuku had been dealing with it his whole and hadn't really expected any change, so there was no reason to get upset. He looked out the window and smiled at the gorgeous sunny day. It was so nice he decided to have his lunch outside. Not wanting to miss out on this opportunity, Izuku started walking faster than the school allowed. As he made his way to the exit, Izuku rounded a corner. Gah! Oh! And collided with another student. Izuku fell to the floor with a thud, landing on his butt. Clutching his thankfully intact bento in one arm, Izuku rubbed his head. Did I run into a wall or something? Oi! Watch where you're going. He looked to see a large, burly male student with short purple hair and cat ears on top of his head. He was flanked by a female student with long black hair, curly goat-like horns on top of her head, and a sour expression on her face. I'm sorry. Izuku blurted out, panicked. He scrambled to his feet as he tried to form an apology. I shouldn't have run. I'm so sorry I ran into you. Why you are, the horned girl said. She lunged forward and stood so close her horns threatened to poke Izuku's eyes out. Just who do you think you are, bub? Some big shot who can go around messing with my boyfriend. Izuku didn't know how to respond to that. He stood there gaping like a fish while she continued to glare at him. That's enough, babe, her boyfriend said. He placed a hand on her shoulder and pulled his girlfriend back. This loser isn't worth our time. He looked down at Izuku, finally noticing his bento, and smirked. How about this, you give us that lunch of yours and we'll call it even. What? Izuku said, taken aback. What are you, deaf? I said give me dash. No, Izuku said, soft but stern. The two students were shocked, looking at Izuku with wide eyes, seemingly unable to process what had just happened. The hell did you just say? The girl said, legitimately confused. No way. My mom worked hard to make me this lunch. I'm not handing it over to you. Izuku's voice rang throughout the hall, sounding much braver than he felt. He knew how hard his mother worked to make sure he was properly fed, and he wasn't about to let these two jackasses let it all go to waste. The boy's face twisted in anger. With teeth bared, cat ears pushed, and a tail Izuku hadn't noticed before whipping back and forth, he looked ready to tear Izuku's head off. Listen here, you little sheet, he said, almost growling. I'm a nice guy, so I'll give you one more chance to hand over the bento and we'll walk away. The boy stalked forward, getting ready to pounce if he was refused again. Izuku wanted to run, but he didn't. He stood his ground and stared down the much larger boy. I'm not going to let my classmates push me around anymore, Izuku thought as his body shook, but he kept a firm grip on his lunch. I'm going to be a hero, and heroes don't back down from villains. That's it, the purple-haired boy said when it became clear Izuku wasn't going to hand over his lunch. Prepare for a world of hurt you dash. What's going on here? A stern voice cut through the air. The three students looked to see Mr. Kita, Izuku's homeroom teacher, walking towards them, a scowl on his face. The purple-haired boy smirked. Nothing, sir, we were just dash. You were bullying Midoriya, weren't you? Mr. Kita said. Well, you leave him alone or you two will be getting a one-way ticket to the principal's office. All three students were shocked by what Mr. Kita had just, Izuku most of all. What? Izuku thought, shell-shocked by what was happening. This can't be Mr. Kita, can it? He looked Mr. Kita over and saw the same pale blonde comb-over and receding hairline, confirming that this was his homeroom teacher. Teach, the girl said. You do knows who this guy is, right? Oh, I'm perfectly aware of who Midoriya is, he said as placed hand on Izuku's shoulder. He shivered under Mr. Kita's touch. Now scram before I get angry. At that, the couple turned around and ran off, leaving Izuku and Mr. Kita alone. What the hell was that? Izuku thought, still in shock over what had just happened. He glanced at Mr. Kita awkwardly. The blonde man simply grinned, his hand still placed uncomfortably on Izuku's shoulder. Was this really the same man who, just this past Monday, had been content to sit back and watch as Izuku's classmates ruthlessly bullied him? Not to look a gift horse in the mouth, Izuku decided to thank Mr. Kita, no matter how odd his behavior was. Mr. Kita, sir, he said as pulled himself out his teacher's grip. Thank you for, coming to my rescue. I'm not sure what I would have done if you hadn't shown up. It's no trouble at all, Midoriya, Mr. Kita said, still grinning like a madman. Izuku squirmed under his teacher's gaze, feeling very uncomfortable. Mr. Kita either didn't notice or didn't care, as continued to talk as if nothing was wrong. You know, he said, warmly. Izuku supposed that was the best way to describe his tone, but that still didn't feel right. Why don't you come and have lunch in the teacher's room with me? No chance of anyone trying to steal it there. His grin only widened, and Izuku only became more uncomfortable. Okay, Izuku said stiffly. Great, Mr. Kita declared. He wrapped his arm around Izuku's shoulders and led him towards the teacher's room. Izuku sat next to Mr. Kita as he pulled out his own normal-sized bento. They ate in silence for the next few minutes while other teachers went about their routines around them, some giving them odd looks but otherwise paying them no mind. So, Izuku. The green-haired boy nearly choked at the sound of his first name. He turned and stared wide-eyed at Mr. Kita, that grin still on his face. You don't mind if call you by your given name, do you? The teacher asked. You can call me Izuku if you want, he said reluctantly, not wanting to upset his teacher. Excellent, Mr. Kita said, grinning even wider, either not realizing or not caring that Izuku hadn't actually answered his question. You know, have I ever told you that you're one of my favorite students? I am, Izuku said, very confused. This was the same man who had let his classmates use him as their personal stress release ball and punching bag, who stood by and let them laugh at and degrade him, and now he was telling Izuku that he was his favorite student. Of course you, Mr. Kita said with a chuckle that sent shivers down Izuku's spine. You're so smart and polite and considerate, why wouldn't you be? He paused to take a sip of his coffee before continuing. I tell you, Izuku, you've got a bright future ahead of you. You've got a sharp mind and a drive to succeed. Everyone will be dying to get their hands on you when you graduate. Mr. Kita kept talking, but Izuku wasn't listening. He was lost in his own little world while he tried to figure out what the hell was going on. The way Mr. Kita was treating was nice, Izuku had to admit that at least, but it was so strange and jarring. Mr. Kita, heck, all his teachers, had always been content to practically ignore his existence. Now he was being treated like the apple of Mr. Kita's eye. I should be happy, I guess, Izuku thought. Most students would probably kill for an opportunity like this, but this 180 degrees attitude adjustment feels wrong. Izuku, he finally heard Mr. Kita calling his name, snapping him out of his stupor. Hey, Izuku exclaimed. Are you all right? You had a really weird look on your face. Need me to take you to the nurse's office? No, I'm fine, he blurted out, feeling more uncomfortable than ever. I just spaced out for a second. He quickly glanced at the clock, not actually bothering to read the time. This has been really fun, Mr. Kita, but I should get back to class before next period starts. Mrs. Hamasaki's pretty strict. Mr. Kita smiled. Well, we should do this again sometime, Izuku. Izuku shivered at the sound of his first name coming from Mr. Kita's mouth. Sure, but can I ask you a favor? Please just call me Midoriya when we're in class. Sure, don't want them to think I'm giving you special treatment, the teacher said in a sickeningly sweet tone. Gee great, I'll see you later, Mr. Kita, Izuku said as he got up and made his way to the door, getting out of the teacher's room as fast as he could. Mr. Kita stared at the door for a moment but went back to his lunch. That went well, he thought, completely oblivious to his students' discomfort. The next morning found Izuku being driven to Recovery Girl's house for his first lesson on how to control his quirk. They had decided that they couldn't just keep bringing Izuku to UA without causing suspicion, lest a teacher or a student saw him and started asking questions they didn't want to answer. Here we are, Toshinori said as he pulled up to Recovery Girl's house. It was a white and blue single-story building with a garden in the front. Before he unbuckled his seatbelt, Toshinori turned to Izuku. You sure you want to start today? I can take you home if you're not feeling well. I'm sure. I'm feeling much better today, Izuku said, keeping up the act he started yesterday. He'd been in a bit of a stupor after having lunch with Mr. Kita that had lasted until after dinner, and both his mother and Toshinori had taken note. They'd asked what was wrong, but not wanting to mention his teacher's odd behavior, he'd lied and said he felt sick. Inko had insisted he go to bed early and asked him to stay home today, and Toshinori had offered to reschedule his first lesson with Recovery Girl. It had taken a little back and forth, but Izuku had managed to convince them that all he needed was good night's sleep. Toshinori seemed skeptical, fully aware of Izuku's predisposition to overworking himself. He raised an eyebrow at first, but sighed and relented, deciding to trust his protégé's judgment. He got out of the truck and Izuku followed suit shortly after, his yellow backpack in hand. The blonde man knocked on the door and they were greeted to the sight of Recovery Girl dressed in a light pink muumuu. Her hair was in its usual bun, although lacking the syringe hairpin. She had also replaced her syringe cane with a normal wooden cane. "Good morning you too," she said with a smile. "Good morning, Recovery Girl," Toshinori replied. "Hello, Recovery Girl. It's a pleasure to be here," Izuku said a little stiffly. "Thanks for agreeing to train me." Recovery Girl looked at Izuku, eyeing him suspiciously. "All Might told me you weren't feeling well yesterday." She narrowed her eyes, sending a shiver down Izuku's spine. "I don't need to give another dose of stupidity medicine, do I?" She gripped her cane more tightly as she spoke. "No, The first dose cured me of my stupid," Izuku said with a nervous laugh. He was not in the mood for another cane beating. She smiled, relaxing her grip on her cane. "Splendid, now come inside and grab a drink and then we'll start working on your quirk." Recovery Girl led them to the living room and asked them to sit down. "I'll bring us some tea," she said before walking into the kitchen. Izuku sat down and looked down at his hands, his palms sweaty. "Nervous?" He looked to see Toshinori sitting across from him, a comforting look on the blonde man's face. "Yeah, a little," Izuku replied. "But I'm also really excited. This quirk, my quirk, I've barely scratched the surface of what it can do. If can master it and one for all, then there's no doubt that I'll become a hero." Toshinori smiled warmly in agreement. "I'll bet. I'm excited to see what you can do with it, that is if you can use it without passing out." Izuku blushed while Toshinori let out a chuckle. He stopped laughing and looked Izuku straight in the eye, suddenly far more serious. "But I have been meaning to talk to you about something that's been bugging me. Why did break your finger at school?" "Crap." Izuku thought. He'd been dreading the idea of this conversation. His mother had thankfully never learned of his self-inflicted injury and had hoped his mentor would have forgotten that little detail by now. No such luck. Well, the thing is," Izuku rambled as he tried desperately to think of a good answer. He went on for almost 30 seconds until Toshinori gave him a look, and he sighed in defeat. Izuku tore his eyes away from Toshinori's and looked down at the floor, guilt and shame painted across his face. "My classmates, they were making fun of me," Izuku said, his voice soft and meek. "When I told them I had a quirk, they laughed and called me a liar, said I was desperate for attention. As Izuku continued, his voice became shaky. "I just wanted them to stop. To stop laughing and believe me, and hurting myself to use my quirk was the only thing I could think of." Tears started to form at the corners of Izuku's eyes as he desperately tried to wipe them away while Toshinori looked on in silence, his face unreadable. "I know it was stupid and petty, but I couldn't stand it," Izuku said. He looked down at the floor in silence, shame permeated every inch of his being. He was so caught up in his own thoughts that he didn't even notice Toshinori rise from his seat. "Young Midoriya," Izuku looked up to see Toshinori kneeling in front of him. "I want you to listen to me very carefully, okay?" "Okay," Izuku said, tears still in his eyes. "Okay." Toshinori placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. It steadied him and made him feel warm. Safe, relaxed. "Young Midoriya, you did nothing wrong. Was it stupid? Perhaps. Was it impulsive? Most definitely. But was it wrong? No, not all. What was wrong was how your classmates treated you. Discovering you had a quirk was incredible for you, your dream come true. They took your joy and happiness and tried to trample all over it. They forced you into a corner and you fought back." Toshinori shifted his arms and wrapped Izuku in a tight embrace. "You did nothing wrong, young Midoriya." Izuku was stunned, completely at a loss for words. Unable to think of a response, Izuku did the only thing he could do and hugged back, burying his face in the crook of Toshinori's neck. They stayed like that for about a minute before separating, smiles on both of their faces. Better? Toshinori asked. Better, Izuku said, feeling as though a weight had been lifted off his chest. Thank you, Yagi. Thank you so much. No problem. However, Toshinori's tone shifted as he pointed a finger at his protégé. I don't want you hurting yourself like that again, got it? Got it, Izuku said sheepishly, embarrassed. I promise not to break my bone on purpose again, hero's honor. While Izuku and Toshinori had their heart-to-heart, Recovery Girl stood next to the door between the kitchen and living room with a smile on her face and a tray in her hands. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but she couldn't very well interrupt their moment. I never pegged you as the parental type, All Might, but even the best of us can be wrong, Recovery Girl thought. She waited until Toshinori had returned to his seat before entering with a pot of green tea and a large plate of rice ball. Sorry that took so long, I'd misplaced the tea, she said as she poured her guests cups of tea. That's okay, Izuku replied. He immediately grabbed a rice ball and took a bite. This is really good. Did you make these? Actually, they're store-bought. My local supermarket makes them fresh every day, Recovery Girl explained. Now, we need to discuss how we'll be going about training your quirk. Izuku nodded. He fished out his journal, Hero Analysis for the Future number 13, and a pencil from his backpack. He leaned forward ever so slightly, ready to take in everything the heroine had to say. Recovery Girl smiled at Izuku's enthusiasm. Now, I'm assuming you know how my quirk, Heal, works, right? Of course, Izuku said as his face lit up. He flipped through his journal until he found the section dedicated to Recovery Girl. You accelerate the body's natural healing abilities by kissing them. You can use your quirk to heal broken bones in seconds, but it uses up the patient's stamina. He held up his journal to show off a crude sketch of Recovery Girl accompanied by a set of notes. She nodded. Correct, from the tests we've done it appears your quirk works on a similar principle, using the body's energy to accelerate the natural healing process. However, you use your own energy instead of the patient's, allowing you to heal yourself as well. Unfortunately, you have zero control over your quirk when you try and use it actively. You completely drained your energy reserves to heal one finger. I can do the same thing using barely a fraction of someone's stamina. I see, Izuku said as he stroked his chin contemplatively. So my quirk is like, oh. His face lit up as realization struck him like lightning. My quirk is like washing the dishes. The room went dead silent at Izuku's statement. Recovery Girl and Toshinori stared at him as though he'd grown a second head. I'm sorry, but what? Recovery Girl said as blinked in surprise. Young Midoriya, are you sure you're alright? Toshinori asked, concern written across his face. It's like this, Izuku continued, seemingly unaware or unperturbed by their stares. Injuries are like all the food and germs left on the dishes after dinner, and my quirk is like the soap and water you use to clean them. Izuku had turned to a new page in his journal and started jotting down notes as he spoke. But dishes can only get so clean. Once you've washed off all the food scraps and germs, there's no point in cleaning it any further. If you keep scrubbing, you're just wasting soap and water. As he finished writing down his notes, they could only gape at his quite frankly stunning analysis of his own quirk. That's right, Recovery Girl said, still trying to process what she'd just witnessed. I couldn't have put it better myself. It's a pretty boring comparison, but I have to admit it's a damn good one, Toshinori said with a bloody laughing. So I guess what you've got to do is imagine turning off the water when you're done scrubbing, and maybe using less soap. The three finished off the tea rice ball before moving to Recovery Girl's home clinic. There was a bed, an examination table, and a dozen or so machines that Izuku had know what were for. At Recovery Girl behest, Izuku stripped down to his underwear and sat at the examination table. She hooked him up to various machines that he had no idea what they were supposed to do and brought over a large bowl of gummies. What are those for? Izuku asked, eyeing the bowl of brightly colored fruit snacks. They're my specially formulated gummies, designed to refuel a person's stamina after I heal them, Recovery Girl said as she looked over the machines. I figured they'd be useful to stop you from passing out. She turned back to Izuku. Now, this machine is designed to measure your energy output when you use your quirk. Try and activate it when you're ready, I'll tell you when to stop. Izuku nodded and went to work. He focused on the feeling from Monday and tried to recreate it. Come on, I know it's there, he thought as tried to grab hold of the power he'd called upon before. I did it before and I can do it again. He dug deep inside himself, desperately clawing for the power he knew he had. Sweat formed on his brow as his focus sharpened and his resolve hardened. But alas, nothing. That feeling, that incredible sensation of drawing upon his quirk refused to come out. Izuku let out a breath and looked at Recovery Girl. Anything? He asked, his voice almost pleading. No change, I'm sorry, she said. Damn it, he said, almost a whisper. Izuku looked down at his feet, refusing to meet anyone else's gaze. Well, Recovery Girl began with an unpleasant look on her face. You were injured the last time you used it actively. Perhaps if you were injured again you could use it. What? Toshinori screamed, blood spurting out of his mouth. You want to hurt him? Are you crazy? Of course not. Recovery Girl gave him a stiff whack on the head with her cane. I don't like the idea of hurting the boy either. Lord knows I'm not going to break his bones. She sighed, the same unpleasant look returning to her face. But if it's the only way for him to use his quirk right now, let's do it. They looked at Izuku, his face brimming with determination. It was clear he wasn't backing down. She sighed again. Very well, she said. Recovery Girl went to a drawer and pulled out a scalpel. Izuku looked at it with trepidation. Please, hold out your hand. Izuku nodded and did as she asked. He grit his teeth as Recovery Girl slid the scalpel across the palm of his hand. Her old hands were precise and steady until the blade broke the skin. It wasn't a very deep cut, but it was enough to draw blood. He looked at his bleeding hand, a pained smile on his. Let's do this, he thought. Izuku closed his eyes and reached inside himself, focusing on the pain in his hand and the desire to fix it. Come on, come on. He knew the power was inside him. He just had to there. He grabbed hold of it and felt the same energy spread throughout his body. I've got it, I've dash. Stop. His eyes snapped open and he let go, the energy faded from his body. Izuku looked down at his hand and saw it completely healed. He turned to look at Recovery Girl, who was staring slack-jawed at the monitors, and suddenly realized how tired and hungry he was. What the hell? She exclaimed, pushing the bowl of gummies towards Izuku, who started devouring them without a second thought. I can certainly say I wasn't expecting that. The energy output was incredible. Recovery Girl removed Machine's patches from Izuku's body and gave him a towel to wipe his hand while Toshinori handed him his clothes. Good news is I didn't pass out, Izuku said with a smile, feeling much better having devoured half the gummies. But his face fell as he sighed in frustration, remembering his promise to Toshinori. Bad news is I had to get hurt again to use it. Toshinori and Recovery Girl looked at each other, unsure of what to do. Suddenly, Toshinori was struck with an idea. A name, he said. Izuku and Recovery Girl turned to look at him. You haven't named it yet, so maybe that's the trick. Yeah, you're right. But, Izuku said as. His face blushed pink. None of the names I've come up with so far are very good. In any event, you should go home and rest, Recovery Girl. I'll see you next Saturday, and I don't want you practicing your quirk without my supervision, understand? Okay, Izuku said with a yawn. He and Toshinori bid Recovery Girl farewell and got in the blonde man's truck. As they drove away, Toshinori could help but his protégé struggled to stay awake. Tired? He asked. No, I'm. Izuku muttered out as he tried to fight against sleep, although the motion of the truck wasn't helping him stay awake. Hey, it's okay, sleep if you want. Maybe you'll think of a good name for your quirk in your dreams, Toshinori said. Why don't you lean your seat back? There's a button the side of it. Okay. Izuku said as he did just that, and finally, let sleep take hold. His eyes gently shut as the soft rhythm of his breathing slowed and his head lolled against the headrest. Geez kid, you make me want to take a nap, Toshinori thought with a smile. He drove in silence feeling light, happy even. A lot had changed for Toshinori ever since he'd met Izuku Midoriya, and he wouldn't have it any other way. Sunday evening found Izuku and Inko sitting at the dinner table waiting for Hisoshi to call them. He'd sent his wife an email yesterday saying he'd call them at 8 o'clock, so they'd eaten an early dinner and washed all the dishes in preparation. It was currently 9. Do think you he forgot? Izuku asked solemnly. What? No, I'm sure he'll call any minute, Inko said, although she didn't sound very confident. Izuku looked down at his mother's phone, lying on the dining table, and sighed. It's not that surprising, he's a really busy guy. The memory of their last talk came to the forefront of his mind, a sharp pain ached in his chest. But still. I'm going to hang out in my room, maybe look over some notes and work out, Izuku said as he stood up. His mother wanted to protest, but she took one more look at the clock and then her phone. All right. Izuku turned and took one step, when suddenly, ring ring, ring ring. The phone rang. Shocked, Izuku looked to see my hubby as the caller ID. Inko immediately answered and put it on speakerphone. Hello, anyone there? Came Hisoshi's husky voice, still shaking but far steadier than before. Dad! Hisoshi! They cried out, both absolutely overjoyed. Hey there, how are my two favorite people in the world? We're fine. We thought something had happened to you, Izuku said. Really? I know I'm a little late, but it's not that bad. Hisoshi, dear, you said you'd call us at 8 o'clock, Inko said a little annoyed. So? It's only 8:30. Izuku and Inko looked at each other in surprise. Dad, it's 9:30 here, not 8, Izuku said. The line went dead silent. Dad, are you dash? Goddammit! Hisoshi yelled. Izuku and Inko jumped back in shock. You guys are 8 hours ahead of me, not 7. Dimmin' it, I'm so sorry. Hey, it's okay, what matter is that you called, Izuku said reassuringly. But it's still a pretty big screw-up on my part, I hope you can forgive me. Of course we forgive you, Inko said brightly. Just make sure you call at the right time next time, okay? Okay. So how's work been? She asked. And so, the Midoriya family, for the first time in a long time, talked as a family. Izuku told his father how his classes were going and what it was like working for Toshinori. Inko told her husband about the newest neighborhood gossip and how it had changed since he'd been gone. Hisoshi told them about his job and co-workers, and the misadventures he'd gotten into. It was a great time for all of them. So, I'm grocery shopping at Marks & Spencer, and I see the last bag of prawn cocktail potato crisps. I go to grab it and there's this white-haired old biddy with effing talons for nails who goes for it at the same time. I'm having a bad day and about ready to blow a gasket, so you know what I tell her? What? Isaac asked with rapt attention. His mother sitting across from giggling up a storm. I tell her, give me the diamond bag you old hag, you die trying to open it anyway. Izuku looked at the phone slack-jawed while Inko's laughter grew even louder. And then, this is the crazy part, then she effing spits in my face. I let go of the chips and she takes off like a rocket, must have had a speed quirk or something, and by the time I catch up she's already at the register paying for them. When the old biddy sees me again she puts on the biggest sheet-eating grin she muster and tells me to shove it where the sun doesn't shine and walks out the effing door. At this point Izuku and Inko had burst into uncontrollable laughter, tears streaming down their faces while they clutched their sides. Dad, that's awful. I can't believe you said that, Izuku said through fits of giggles. This is why I was afraid of leaving your father alone, Inko managed to choke out before devolving back into laughter. Bleary-eyed, Izuku managed to take a look at the wall clock. It was 11:01, they'd been talking for more than an hour and a half. This has been really great, Dad, but it's getting late, Izuku said as he finally got his laughter under control. I've got school tomorrow and I need to get to bed. Oh, right. It's 3 here so it's 11 where you are. Yeah? Izuku said with a yawn. Anyway, night Dad, talk to you later. Wait. Don't hang up yet. Surprised, Inko and Izuku looked at each other. What is it, honey? Inko asked. It's just, well, look, I'll just come out and say it. I've been a real sheet dad and sheet husband ever since I went overseas, and I'm sorry. No, it's okay, Izuku pleaded. You've been really busy, and you're supporting us all by yourself, and dash. But that's no excuse. I left you guys alone for who knows how long, and it took you finding out you had a quirk for us to talk. There's so much I've missed, moments we'll never get back, it's terrible. I promise, from now on I'm going to be a better dad and husband. We're going to talk like this every week, and I'm not leaving you two alone again. Izuku and Inko they were shocked, overwhelmed even. Ever since he'd taken his job overseas, communication with Hisoshi had become more and more sparing until one day they'd stopped talking entirely. The only reason they knew he was even alive was because of the money he wired to them every month. This felt like the first step to being a real family again. Well, you two need to get to bed. Good night, love you. Izuku was taken aback by his father's bold statement but decided to roll with it. Good night, Dad, I'll love you too. Inko smiled, a warm, gentle feeling spread throughout her body, one she hadn't felt in a long time. I love you too, honey. Now don't go sing off any more old ladies, or you'll get an earful. She and Hisoshi laughed at her joke. Don't worry, I won't. I certainly learned my lesson. Love you, sweetheart, good night. At that, Hisoshi hung up. Izuku and Inko got ready for bed, both feeling lighter than they had in years. Izuku's lungs felt like they were on fire. In fact, his whole body did. He threw a discarded bicycle onto the back of Toshinori's truck and then sat on the ground, panting like a dog. Today had been a particularly intense workout session at Dagobah Beach. It felt like his first day of training all over again. Izuku pulled an energy bar wrapped in green foil out his pocket and began munching on it. Good work today, kid. Izuku looked up to see Toshinori standing over him, a huge grin on his face. You're doing much better than you were a month ago. Keep this up, and you'll be ready for one for all in no time. Izuku smiled back. Thanks, Yagi. I can feel the difference. It's still hard to believe I'm really doing this. Suddenly, Izuku's smile turned sour, his expression turning into one of frustration. Are you okay? What's wrong? Toshinori asked. What? Nothing's wrong, Izuku sputtered out. Toshinori narrowed his eyes. The green-haired boy relented and sighed. It's just that I'm frustrated. Frustrated? Toshinori asked with a raised eyebrow. Why would you be frustrated? Your progress has phenomenal, better than I could have expected. I know, but I'm not talking about my physical conditioning, Izuku explained. I'm talking about my quirk. Oh, Toshinori said, feeling as though he'd just been slapped in the face after insulting someone. Over the past month, Izuku had made great strides in building up his muscles to take on one for all. But his progress in training his quirk had been minimal at best, almost negligible. Toshinori silently stood there twiddling his thumbs, unsure of what to say. I understand why he's so frustrated. A month without any progress would even get me down. Usually telling him that he'll get it eventually works, but there are only so many times I can say it before it loses all meaning. He wished he could give Izuku more advice, but he couldn't really speak from experience. Toshinori thought back to when he first began training to use one for all and the rapid-fire progress he made from day one. He almost wished he'd struggled more to use it so he could advise his protege. Suddenly, Toshinori remembered something his teacher had told. That should lighten the mood. Have you tried clenching your butt cheeks? Toshinori asked. Izuku looked his mentor, blinking in surprise. I'm sorry, Yagi, but have I what? Your butt cheeks, the blond man said. Have you tried clenching them when you use your quirk? Is that how you use one for all? Izuku asked, almost yelling in shock. Sort of, Toshinori said. Why don't you give it a try next time during your next training session with Recovery Girl? It might just be the secret to unlocking your full potential. Izuku gaped like fish at Toshinori's words, completely silent. But then he burst into a fit of giggles at the sheer ridiculousness of what he'd just heard. Oh my god, I can't wahaha. Izuku clutched his sides, unable to control his laughter. Worked better than I expected, Toshinori thought with a smile. Come on, let's go to Jinko's, you've earned it, he offered. Izuku looked at his mentor and nodded, all dark thoughts banished from his mind for the moment. But even as he filled his belly with bowls of soup and curry, the creeping darkness returned to Izuku's mind. This time, he was determined to hide and not worry his mentor. After all, the #1 hero didn't need any more stress in his life. Wednesday found Katsuki Bakugo sitting class as usual, and he was sessed off. Honestly, that wasn't much of a surprise, he was always sessed off, but for the past month, he'd been more sessed off than usual. If you asked him why he was in such a foul mood, he'd most likely scream obscenities at you and then stomp away. There was also the chance he'd try to blow you up. But there was one sole reason Bakugo had been so angry for the past month and a half, and it was sitting in the classroom with him. Midoriya, Mr. Kita said, calling on the green-haired boy. Can you please answer the questions on the board? Wise, sir, Izuku said nervously. As Izuku started listing off the answers, all of them correct, Bakugo seethed in his seat. What a joke, Bakugo thought, gripping his pencil so tightly it threatened to snap in half. Just because he's suddenly got a quirk, everyone treats him like some miracle child. He's the same BSE he's always been. Why I am the only one who effing sees it? Eventually, the bell rang, signaling the end of the PRD and the start of lunchtime. Most of Bakugo's classmates pulled out their lunches from home, a few others left the classroom and to buy food at the student store. As Bakugo pulled out his bento, he saw Izuku get up out of the corner of his eye and make a beeline for the door. Bakugo! The blond boy looked up to see Mr. Kita standing over his desk with the same idiotic smile on his face as always. F off you balding, dyed blonde, creep, Bakugo thought as his scowl deepened. He'd really wanted to say that out loud, but he was smart enough to know that would probably get sent to the principal's office. And yes, Bakugo could tell Mr. Kita dyed his hair. The sniveling BSA did a pretty great job of hiding that little tidbit from the rest of the class, but Bakugo could tell from day one that wasn't his natural color. What do you want? The naturally blonde boy asked. The teacher grinned even wider. I was just wondering if you'd like to have lunch with me in the teacher's room. You know, to get away from all these noisy kids. Bakugo's eyes narrowed. Go to hell. Not interested, he said as he unpacked his bento. All right, I get it, Mr. Kita said with the same stupid smile on his face. Maybe next time. I'll eat with you when you stop going bald. Whatever, Bakugo said before digging into his lunch. Mr. Kita walked off and exited the classroom, a little more pep in his step than usual. When is that BSE going to get it through his thick skull that I'm not interested in eating lunch with him? Bakugo thought as chomped down on a piece of spicy chicken. He thought back to Izuku who'd run out of the classroom as soon the bell had rung and grit his teeth. Don't think I haven't noticed you kissing up to comb over, Deku. Ever since school had started, Bakugo's homeroom teacher would regularly invite him to have lunch in the teacher's room with him, and every time Bakugo turned him down. But recently he'd noticed something strange. Mr. Kita's invitations to lunch, while still annoying and damnable regular occurrence, had become less frequent, which Bakugo was thankful for. However, as Mr. Kita invited him less and less, Bakugo had noticed him becoming a hell of a lot chummier with Izuku, and that sessed him off. You think you're special just 'cause you've started showing your quirk now? Well, you're wrong. You're the same fat loser you've always been. Bakugo thought as he wolfed down his lunch, barely tasting it. I've figured out your stupid plan, Deku. You pretend to be quirkless, laughing at me and everyone else all the while, and then reveal it just before you ace entrance exams to put the spotlight on you and become everyone's demon darling. Makes me sick. Even with that stupid quirk of yours, you won't get into UA. I won't let you beat me. Bakugo brought his chopsticks to his lips and bit down on air. He raised an eyebrow. The F-dash. He looked down and saw that he'd unknowingly eaten his lunch during his mental tirade. He snarled and stuffed his bento box back into his bag. Your stupid effing plan won't work. You're not getting into you, Deku. Bakugo thought as he pulled out his math textbook and started studying, nothing better to do. Bakugo was certain Izuku's plan wouldn't work, and there was no way this wasn't some sort of scheme the little weasel had cooked up. Bakugo didn't believe Izuku for a second when he said he'd just found out about it on Saturday and still didn't. It was the only logical conclusion, at least that's what he told himself. That had to be what happened, otherwise. Bakugo didn't want to think about what the alternative meant. Izuku stared at this, his hands in silence, frustrated with and confused. What am I doing wrong? Why can't I control my quirk? Yesterday had been another failure of a training session, in Izuku's eyes, with Recovery Girl. She'd yet again been forced to make an incision on his body for him to activate his quirk. While he'd gotten ever so slightly better at regulating the amount of energy he used, he'd made zero progress on isolating specific areas of his body and was still restricted to full-body aura. Recovery Girl had reassured him that he would master his quirk with time and that he was doing all could. It hadn't done much to raise Izuku's spirits. If I can't even use my quirk, then what chance to have of mastering one for all? Izuku thought as he looked down at his lap, oblivious to the world around him. Can I even become a hero? Izuku! The green-haired boy looked up, the voice snapping him out his stupor. Are you okay, sweetheart? Inko asked with a soft voice, her face the epitome of motherly concern. You've had this weird look on your face all day, and it's making me worried. Yeah, kiddo. Izuku looked down at his mother's phone, Hisoshi's concerned voice emanating from it. You've been dead quiet ever since I called. Everything all right? I'm fine, really, Izuku said with a small smile, trying to dissuade their concern. Work was just really tiring today. Mr. Yagi's got me working hard. All I need is a good night's sleep. Inko went silent, her eyes never for a moment left her son. Why won't you tell me anything, Izuku? She sighed, resigned to the fact all she could do was silently support her baby. And this would be the end of it. Well, it would have been if weren't for the fact that she wasn't alone this time. Bull crap. Izuku and Inko looked down at the phone in shock, Hisoshi's blunt statement coming completely out of left field. What? Izuku asked, still trying to process what he'd just heard. I said that it's bull crap, Hisoshi said a little awkwardly as if he was trying to find the right words. Izuku, if your mom thinks there's something going then, well look, you can talk us about anything, that's what we're here for. I know I've been a lousy dad, but I want you to know you don't have to hide anything from your mom or me. I'm really fine, honest, Izuku blurted out a little louder than he meant to. No, Inko said, drawing her son's full attention. Izuku, you are not fine, you've been brooding and spacing out ever since you got home yesterday, it isn't like you. She struggled to hold herself together as tears formed at the corners of her eyes. I want to help you, we want to help you, but we can't do that if you don't tell us. What's wrong? Inko struggled to hold back her tears as waves of pent-up emotions came crashing down onto her. Izuku was stunned, taken aback by his mother change in attitude. For the longest time, she'd been supporting him in silence as he came home with bruises and eyes red from crying, but refused to tell about what happened. It was a routine they'd fallen into when he was about. Actually, Izuku couldn't remember when it had happened. It felt like they'd always done this awkward dance of obvious lies and unvoiced concerns. When was the last time I opened up to her? Izuku pondered to himself. How long has it been since we really talked to each other? And how long have I been hurting her? Izuku looked down at his once more as Hisoshi tried to console his wife. Why do I need to keep this from her, from Dad too? He clenched his fist. No, I don't need to keep it from them. Why, you're right, Izuku forced out, grabbing the attention of his mom and dad. The truth is I've been feeling really shitty lately. He balled the fabric of his pants in his fists, gripping so hard his knuckles turned white. I found out about my quirk a month ago, but I haven't made a single bit progress on using it. Tears pricked the corners of Izuku's eyes, saying this, opening up to his mom and dad like this felt like pulling teeth. I can't stop now, I have to finish what I started, I can't keep hurting mom like this. No matter what I do, Izuku said as he choked back tears, determined to tell his parents exactly what he'd been going through. I can't seem to improve at all. It feels like I've hit a wall and I can't get past it. I don't know what to do. Izuku tried to rub away the tears, but they just kept coming. Suddenly, Izuku found himself in Mother's embrace, his face buried in the crook of her neck. Izuku asked, stunned. What are you dash? It's okay, baby, it's okay, Inko spoke softly into his ear. She rubbed slow circles into his back as she held onto Izuku and refused to let it all out, Izuku. I'm here for you. And so he did. Izuku cried into his mother's for who knows how long. Hisoshi stayed on the line, listening intently to his wife and child, ready to jump in a moment's notice. When Izuku had finally finished bawling, his eyes were puffy and red, dried tears stained his face, and honestly, Izuku looked like a mess, and he knew it. But that didn't matter, he just felt so relieved. Inko smiled. Better? Yeah, Izuku said with a sniffle. Well, that's a relief, Hisoshi said, drawing their attention back to the phone. I'll tell you, kiddo, sometimes I think your mom's real quirk is making people feel better. She's a real miracle worker. Hisoshi, Inko said, her cheeks turning red. You're so sweet, but you're embarrassing me. But it's true, Mom, Izuku proclaimed with a smile. You really are awesome. Her whole face turned scarlet at their words. Oh, not you too. Izuku and Hisoshi shared a good-natured chuckle as Inko wriggled in her seat. So anyway, Hisoshi said, concern evident in his voice. You were really worried about figuring out your quirk? Give yourself a break, you've only known about 5 weeks? 6, tops? Kids who've been messing around with their quirks for their whole lives don't have them figured out yet. There's nothing wrong with you, Izuku. I know, Dad, Izuku said with a sigh. Logically I know I'm not doing anything wrong, but I'm frustrated. I've been practicing it, but I haven't made any progress. Well, I don't think it matters. Hey! Izuku exclaimed, wide-eyed. Sheet. Wait, I didn't mean goddammit, why am I so bad at this? Hisoshi sighed in frustration. What I meant to say is that I think you're putting too much stock in your quirk. I don't get it, Izuku asked. Are you saying I should stop practicing my quirk? No, what I'm trying to say is, HHA. Kiddo, let me ask you something. Since you found out you had this quirk, what's changed about you? What's changed about me? Izuku parroted. He placed his hand on his chin, gently tugging at his lower lip in contemplation. After about a minute of thought, Izuku lowered his hand and sighed. If I'm being honest, not much. Hisoshi chuckled. Exactly. What? Mother and son exclaimed together. Izuku, look, you didn't magically change overnight after you found out about your quirk, you're still the same kid you've always been. Your quirk's a part of you, just like your hair, eyes, and ears, but that's not what makes you special. It's what people do with themselves that defines them, and you're no different. I'm sorry I haven't been there for you, but I've always been proud of you. I don't care if it takes you till you're 40, or you master it tomorrow, you're what makes you special, not your quirk. I love you, kiddo. Izuku was silent, shell-shocked. He stared at the phone, unsure of what to say as he felt tears form at the corners of his once again. But they weren't the tears of frustration and despair from before, they were tears joy. Did, Izuku's voice cracked as he tried to speak. What, you're crying? Damn it, I effed up again, didn't I? No way, Dad, you didn't mess up, Izuku said with a smile as tears rolled down his cheeks. I'm crying because He choked back his tears, determined to tell his dad how he felt. I love you, Dad, I love you so much. Thank you. Izuku, Hisoshi said as voice started to crack. Demon, you've got me happy crying too, and if I'm crying then, you've definitely set your mother off. Izuku! Inko yelled as she embraced her son, crying tears of herself. My baby, I love you so much. I knew it. I love you too, Mom, Izuku said as he hugged his mom right back. After a solid 5 minutes of mother and son crying tears of joy together, they'd finally seemed to run out of tears for the night. Are you too good? Yeah, Izuku said, his voice back under control. We're good. Geez, everyone said I cried a lot when I was your age, but you and your mom take the cake. Hisoshi chuckled. Honey, Inko said sternly, an angry pout on her face. I don't think now's the right time for that. Sorry, he said, voice trembling ever so slightly. Seriously, it's a good thing to cry sometimes. It's better to let it all out than to let things fester and build up until it comes out on its own. Hisoshi's voice sounded far more subdued at that last part, and Izuku could help but wonder why. Anyway, Hisoshi said, his voice returned to normal. How about I tell you about work this week? Hisoshi went on to tell Izuku and Inko about how work had gone that week, which included a particularly funny story about a co-worker who brought a sheep into the office. Mother and son had a good laugh and told Hisoshi about how their week had gone. Inko had a particularly interesting story about a purple-haired boy with cat ears and a cat tail who got stuck at the top of a very tall tree on her way home from the supermarket. The poor boy, she said while trying not to giggle. I feel awful for laughing, but I can't help it. He dropped his phone on the way up, and his girlfriend had to call the fire department. He looked absolutely mortified when they came and got him down. Izuku couldn't stop himself from laughing. This is too funny, but why does that sound familiar? He yawned and turned to look at the clock. It read 10, it's that late already. Hey, Dad, Izuku said. It's almost 11 o'clock here, and I've got school tomorrow. Really? Guess we lost track of time. Well, you and your mom should get to bed. Night, Izuku. Night, honey, love you both. Night, Dad. Good night, honey. Inko reached to turn off her phone, but suddenly, hey, Dad. Izuku spoke up. She turned to look at her son as he fidgeted in his seat. What is it, kiddo? It's just, Izuku said in a soft voice as he twiddled his thumbs. Before we went to bed, I just wanted to ask, how do you use your quirk? Mom too. Hey. Inko parroted. I know my quirk's completely different from yours and Mom's, Izuku explained. But I'm still your son, so maybe if I know how you guys use your quirks, I'll have a better grasp on mine. Of course, sweetheart, Inko said with a warm smile. Sure, guess there's no harm in it. Awesome, Izuku said. Let me grab my journal so I can notes. Izuku ran to his room and grabbed Hero Analysis for the future number 13, along with a pen and ran back to the kitchen. Okay, I'm ready. Guess I'll go first. The first thing you should know is that my fire breath comes from my stomach, not my lungs. I produce a gas that's like methane. I can make more of it by contracting my stomach muscles. I hold for anywhere between 2 to 5 seconds, and then I release it into my mouth, and it ignites as I blow it out. Izuku furiously took down notes as his father spoke, hanging on every word. I see it's a bit like a gas burner or a blowtorch. He turned to his mother with inquisitive eyes. What about you, Mom? Well, it's a little hard to describe, Inko said. You know I attract small objects, but it's like... She struggled to find a way to describe her quirk, gently tugging on her bottom lip with her thumb and pointer finger. Oh, she exclaimed as her face lit up. It's like having one of those claw grabber things. I grab onto things with a telekinetic hand and then I pull it towards me, but I can only use it on things I can hold in my hands and actually carry. Hisoshi snickered. Honey, Inko admonished with a pout. Sorry, but I couldn't help think of you with a claw grabber thingy for an arm. Her face softened, and she couldn't help but smile. Well, if I have a claw for an arm, you'd have a lighter for a head. Hisoshi let out an ugly snort. Wouldn't that be an interesting quirk? Mom? Izuku asked, grabbing his mother's attention. Oh, she said. Was I helpful, Izuku? Izuku nodded. Yeah, it was really interesting. Dad's too. Although, he said looking sheepish. You and Dad didn't really answer my question. Inko raised an eyebrow. I think it's super cool how your quirks work, but I wanted to know how you use them, Izuku explained, putting his hand on his chin. Maybe if I put it another way, how do you guys call upon your quirks? Inko stared at him like a deer caught in the headlights. Call upon it. Kiddo, I don't know what the F you're talking about. It's like, what do you think about when you use it, Izuku said. Is there a special phrase you repeat to yourself, or maybe something else? The line went dead silent for a while. Inko stood off to the side. Dad! Don't know how to tell you this, but I don't really call upon or summon my quirk. I just do it. Oh, I see, Izuku said. He turned to his mother, a pleading look in his eyes. Inko shook her head. Help. It's like your father said, I just do it. Izuku sighed, a defeated look on his face. It's okay, he said softly. Thanks for trying to help, I appreciate it. He gave a sort of sad smile, but Inko could still see the sparkle of determination in her son's green eyes. It's okay, sweetheart. I know you'll get the hang of it, Inko said reassuringly. Listen to your mom, kiddo, she's one smart cookie, sweet as one too. Inko blushed while Izuku giggled at his father's joke. Anyway, Mom and I should get to bed, Izuku said. Thanks for telling me about your quirk, I love you, Dad. Love you, honey, Inko said. I hope you have a great week at work. Love you guys too, we'll talk next week. Good night. At that, Hisoshi hung up. Izuku and Inko said their goodnights, got ready for bed and went to sleep. Izuku felt sand between his toes as hot, dry wind buffeted his face. Where am I? Izuku thought as he looked around. He saw an endless, empty desert of reddish-brown sand. This isn't normal, I think. Maybe it is. Suddenly out of the corner of his eye, he saw something. Lying in the sand it shimmered and glittered, sunlight refracting off its brilliant surface. He walked over to it and found it was a heart carved from an emerald greener than all the world's forests. It fit in Izuku's palm, but it thrummed with energy like an excited child, waiting for the moment to release it all. He turned the heart over in his hands, examining it again and again, taking in every cut, edge, and surface, drinking its incredible color. The heart was the most beautiful thing Izuku had ever seen. But, what do I do with it? Something fell from the sky, gently landed on Izuku's head. He grabbed it and discovered it was a note, white as a bone with only 2 words written on it in ink black as night. Do it. Do what? Izuku asked himself. He looked down at the heart once more, but then noticed something new. There was a hole in his chest, his left pectoral to be precise, just about the size his palm. He looked at the hole. He looked at the heart. He looked at the hole. He looked at the heart. The hole. The heart. The hole. The heart. Hole. Heart. Does the heart go in the hole? Izuku knit his brows. He pulled on his lower lip in contemplation. The heart goes in the hole, but why? Izuku looked down at the heart once more, mesmerized by its deep, brilliant green. Green, Izuku thought. Just like my hair, just like my eyes, just like my aura. He gasped. The heart goes in the hole because it's my heart, Izuku thought as the truth finally came to him. The heart is a part of me. With slight trepidation, Izuku brought the heart to his chest. It began to vibrate with excitement and slid into his chest with the ease of a hand in a glove. The hole closed, Izuku felt himself overflowing with power, more power than he knew what to with. It's my heart, my power, a natural part of me. He knew what to do. Izuku dropped to his knees and buried his hands in the scorching sands. He closed his eyes and concentrated, and then, a new day is here. All Might's voice rang through the air. Izuku slowly opened his eyes. What the heck? A new day is here. He looked over and saw his alarm clock, a miniature of All Might standing on top a platform with a red LED screen. The clock read 6, a new day is here. It sounded off again. Izuku reached over and turned it off before it could go off a 4th time. He sat up, stretched, and got out of bed, shivering as his feet touched the floor. He showered, brushed his teeth, and got dressed in his school uniform. When he got to the kitchen, his mother had already finished preparing the first half of his breakfast with the other half on the way. Morning, Mom, Izuku greeted with a yawn. Good morning, Izuku, she said as finished preparing a scrambled egg roll. Did you sleep well? We got to bed a lot later than usual. Yeah, I slept fine, Izuku before he dug into the mountain of food in front of him. I have a weird weem. Swallow your food before you talk. Izuku swallowed his mouthful of food and sighed. Sorry. Anyway, I had a weird dream. Weird dream? Inko asked as she plated more food. What was it about? He rubbed his chin as he chewed another mouthful of food. He swallowed and said, I think I was on a beach. No, I was in a desert and I saw something in the sand. It was sparkly, like a diamond, and then I put it in a hole. Why would drop a diamond down a hole in the ground? Izuku shook his head. No, I don't think it was in the ground, it was in. He trailed off, struggling to recall where the hole was. I don't remember where it was. Inko smiled. Sounds like a crazy dream, but I'm just glad you slept well, sweetheart. Don't want you falling asleep in class. You're right, thanks, Mom, Izuku said with a smile before turning back to his breakfast. But as the chopsticks were halfway to his mouth, he stopped. Sweetheart, he thought, eyes wide. Sweet heart. My heart, Izuku blurted out. What? Inko shrieked. What's wrong, your heart? No, the shiny thing, from my dream, was my heart, Izuku said, trying to calm his mother. It was an emerald cut into the shape of a heart, and there was a hole in my chest where my heart was supposed to be. I put heart in my chest and then he cut himself off, eyes wide in shock. Izuku, Inko asked tentatively. Are you old ? That's it. Izuku yelled, jumping out of his chair and knocking it over. I figured out what my dream means. His mother shrieked, staring at her son like he'd grown a second head. Your phone. Hand me your phone. Izuku asked. Panicked, Inko reached into her pocket and threw it at her son. Af. Izuku caught the phone a hair's breadth from impacting his face. Thank you. He immediately went to her contacts and called his, putting it on speakerphone. Who-wa? Hisoshi said, still half asleep. Who's there? Hi Dad. Izuku, what the hell are you doing calling me right now? Sorry, Izuku said sheepishly. But it's important, I figured it out. Figured what out? Izuku, Inko said, catching her son's attention. I'm confused too, what's going on? My quirk, I finally figured out what I'm doing wrong. Izuku felt invigorated, the fire of determination reignited inside him. I've been looking at my quirk like it's something supernatural, something that needs to be summoned or called upon to serve a purpose. But that's wrong. My quirk, all quirks, are just natural functions of our bodies. The answer was staring me in the face the whole time, but since I thought I was quirkless for so long, I lost sight of it. Whoa, Hisoshi said, now fully awake. That's freaking incredible. How'd you figure it out? What you said last night, how your quirks are something just do, not summon or call upon, Izuku said with a huge smile. Oh, and after I stuck the crystal heart inside my chest. You stuck the what in the where? Inko gaped at her son, utterly baffled by his words. Are you okay? Izuku deflated at their reactions. Right, they don't know. He went to explain his dream to his parents as he finished his breakfast. Afterward, he bid his parents farewell and ran out the door to school. He's incredible, isn't he? Hisoshi said, his voice strong and filled with pride. Figured out what he was doing wrong because of a dream and some offhanded comments. He's going to do incredible things when he grows up. I know, Inko said, a bittersweet smile on her face. Well, looks like I won't getting back to sleep for a while, so, what are you wearing? What? Inko blurted out, her face scarlet. It's a simple question, what's the pretty lady I'm talking to wearing? Oh my, Inko thought. Swallowing air, she picked up her phone and went to her bedroom. On his way to school that morning, Izuku had made sure to call Toshinori and tell him about the exciting new development. Toshinori congratulated his protege and told him he'd pick him up after school and drive them to Recovery Girl's house for a special extra lesson. So, Recovery Girl said as she looked Izuku over. You're sure about this? Yes, Izuku replied, sitting on the examination table in his boxer and the wires hooked up to his chest and arms. I think I know what to do. He looked over to Toshinori as stood in the corner. He flashed his student a smile and gave a thumbs up. Izuku closed his eyes and took a deep breath, centering himself, focusing on his quirk. Don't force it. My quirk is a natural function of my body, just like breathing or walking. He felt for the energy inside himself and found it, but he didn't grab or pull at it. Izuku felt himself breathe in and breathe out, concentrating on the energy and for the first genuinely feeling it. The energy was like a massive reservoir of water, and he could feel it slowly trickling out of him. That must be my passive radiation, Izuku thought idly. Now, how do I control it? As he breathed, Izuku felt the energy shift, expanding and rippling. It continued like this, every breath causing some new change in the reservoir until he felt it. He was hard to describe how he knew what to do, but did it and opened the floodgates, letting the energy flow. As quickly as they'd been opened, he closed them. Izuku opened his eyes, panting. He felt tired, more tired than usual after one of these sessions. Here you go, Recovery Girl said as she handed Izuku the bowl of gummies. He threw manners out the window, scarfed them down like a voracious wolf. After devouring 2/3 of the bowl, Izuku finally looked at Toshinori and Recovery Girl and took their gaping expressions. Well, looks like you can finally use your quirk without hurting yourself, Recovery Girl said with a smile. We still need to work on controlling your output, but this is a huge leap forward. Izuku tried to say something but gave a tired smile instead. I'm proud of you, young Midoriya, Toshinori said. He walked over and gave Izuku a stiff pat on the back. I knew you had it in you. You'll get the hang of it in no time, then it's off to UA. Thanks, Yagi, Izuku replied before letting out a great yawn. Now I think I'm gonna take a... At that moment, he collapsed on the examination table. Toshinori and Recovery Girl looked on and saw a bright smile on his sleeping face. Have a nice nap, you deserve it, Toshinori thought as Recovery Girl handed him a blanket and draped it over Izuku's sleeping form. 3 months had passed since Izuku's incredible breakthrough. In that time he had managed to increase his control over his quirk tremendously, being able to regulate his energy output with much greater precision and localize his aura to smaller areas of his body. In fact, that's what he was practicing right now. Izuku sat on the examination table in Recovery Girl's house once more, the wires hooked up his bare chest. Recovery Girl stood to the side as she watched the monitors. All right, she said as she turned to Izuku. Start off with as low an aura you can manage. Right, Izuku replied deftly. He closed his eyes and concentrated, feeling the well of the energy inside of him. As gently and slowly as he could manage, he opened the floodgates ever so slightly and let the energy flow. As he concentrated, Recovery Girl watched as Izuku's body was enveloped in a soft green aura. If she could describe Izuku's first attempt at using his quirk under her supervision as a fireplace, the energy radiating off of him now was like candlelight. Very good, Recovery Girl said as she looked between Izuku and the monitors, jotting down notes. Now try and focus on your hands so only they radiate healing energy. He nodded wordlessly, concentrating on regulating his quirk. I've got this, I can do this, just divert the energy from my entire body to my hands. As he felt the energy flowing through his body, Izuku imagined it like water running through rivers. His next step was simple, block off the other rivers, so it flowed only to his hands and arms but maintained the same level of energy. Recovery Girl watched as Izuku's aura flickered and shifted. Slowly but surely, the light around his hands and forearms grew brighter, the color becoming more intense. Her gaze shifted as she looked Izuku up and down, and noticed that around the rest of his body the aura had remained the same, like pale green candlelight. You can stop now, Recovery Girl said, and Izuku's aura faded completely. She handed him the bowl of gummies, and he immediately started eating. That was a good try. You were able to focus on your hands and only increase the output there. Hanku, Izuku forced out through a mouthful of gummies. He swallowed, and immediately a frustrated frown marred his face. But I couldn't shut off the rest of my body, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. At that, Recovery Girl smacked him with her cane. Oh! And a scowl appeared on her wrinkled face. How many times do I have to tell you? Before it gets through that thick skull of yours? Recovery Girl shouted, wagging her cane in Izuku's face like a finger. You're not doing anything wrong, Your body's just not used to do this yet. I swear you young people have no patience, you want everything now. She sighed, putting the cane down and leaning on it. Well, at least you've got the drive to work hard. The attitude of yours will be what gets you into UA. Her eyes shifted to the bottom drawer of her desk. And it's what drives me to drink, she whispered as the tip of her tongue ghosted over her lips. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that last part, Izuku asked innocently. Never mind, she exclaimed. Anyway, do you have the time? Yeah, Izuku replied. He reached over to his pants and grabbed his phone. It's 12:34. That's strange, she said as she rubbed her chin. All Might should have been back by dash. I am here. A voice thundered through the house as Izuku and Recovery Girl jumped out their skin. They turned to see Toshinori standing in the doorway in his muscle form with a mountain of boxes in his arms. Sorry I'm late, he said as he placed the boxes on one side of the room. Traffic was a lot worse than I thought it would be. Took me twice as long to get back from UA as it took to drive there. He turned to them with his signature bright and massive smile plastered across his face. You fool! Recovery Girl screamed as she beamed Toshinori in the head with a stress relief ball. In a billow of steam, Toshinori deflated into his skin and bones civilian form. What the hell's wrong with you? Toshinori shouted as he rubbed his head. What's wrong with me is stupid showboaters like you, Recovery Girl growled as she jabbed her cane at the blonde man. You think I want the paparazzi swarming my house like the vultures they are just because Japan's #1 hero showed up at my front door? Geez, calm down, I was only outside in my hero form for a second and I made sure no one was around to see. Besides, is that any way to treat a friend, especially one who just did you a favor? He retorted as he turned back to the boxes. And these boxes are so heavy I didn't have a choice. Recovery Girl sighed. I suppose you're right, thank you, All Might. Excuse me. Toshinori and Recovery Girl turned to Izuku who stared at them with widened eyes. But what exactly did you have Yagi pick up? Oh, it's machine to make gummies, Recovery Girl explained. I asked UA's support department, the boys and girls who make all the heroes' costumes and gadgets, to build me something that would make more potent gummies. If they did it right, a single gummy from this machine would have the calories, minerals, and nutrients of about 100 of the gummies in that bowl. She pointed to said bowl that Izuku was still holding. Izuku nodded in understanding. I see, but why? 2 reasons, she stated as she held up 2 fingers. First, it's going to cost me a lot less than ordering more every week. Also, second, when you're out in the field as a pro hero, it's not exactly efficient to carry around bags of candy with you, is it? Izuku chuckled. I guess not. Oh, I almost forgot, Recovery Girl exclaimed. She turned to Toshinori. All Might, there should be another package about the size of a shoe box along with the parts for the machine, can you grab it for me? All right, Toshinori said as he reached to grab the smallest box from the top of the pile and handed it to Recovery Girl. Thank you, she said. Recovery Girl opened the box to reveal what looked like 3 silver pieces of jewelry, 2 bracelets, and a choker. You had the support department make you jewelry? Toshinori asked with a raised eyebrow. I don't think that's what they're supposed to do. They're not for me, they're for Midoriya, she snapped back. Well, thank you, Recovery Girl, Izuku said with a sheepish smile. But I'm not really a jewelry kind of guy. These aren't pieces of jewelry, Recovery Girl explained. These are finely tuned medical devices. When you wear them, I'll be able to get an accurate reading of your vital signs and your energy output. They'll wirelessly send the information to my phone, my work computer, and my home computer. Whoa, that's so cool, Izuku said as he held one of the bracelets in his hands, turning it over and examining it. Are you getting rid of the old machine? Heavens no, the thing's barely 2 years old. The reason I got these things made is so we could take your training outside of my house. Recovery Girl walked over to her desk and brought back a pink, spiral-bound notebook. I've decided to start you on the next step of your quirk training, healing other people. Ah really? Izuku muttered, surprised by her words. Are you sure? I mean, shouldn't get some more practice in. Actually, I see where she's coming from, Toshinori said as he rubbed his chin. There's only so much you can do just practicing on yourself. You need real experience healing stuff like broken bones, and we're not about to start breaking your arms to train your quirk. Yeah, I guess that makes sense, Izuku muttered as he twiddled his thumbs. But couldn't I just practice on you, Yagi? Toshinori smiled. I appreciate the offer, young Midoriya, but you've already done enough for me. Besides, my injuries aren't exactly what you'll be healing out in the field. He gestured to his body. 5 months ago when he and Izuku had met, Toshinori had been nothing but skin and bones. Now, well, he was still skin and bones, but it wasn't as bad as before. He'd gained about 15 pounds, an extra hour in his hero form, and a bit more color in cheeks. Of course, you'd never know about this when he changed into his hero form and turned into a tower of pure muscle. I guess you're right, Izuku muttered. But I still think I should actively use my quirk on you. I know my passive radiation is healing you, but if I dash... Stop, Toshinori said, holding up his hand. Look, young Midoriya, I appreciate what you're offering, but I don't want you to push yourself too hard. You're already working hard to train your body to handle one for all and master your quirk. I don't want you to worry about me. Izuku's face fell for a moment, frustrated, but then he looked back at Toshinori with a smile. Okay, I promise I'll focus on myself for right now. But I want you to make a promise too. When I graduate, you'll let me heal you as best I can. Alright, guess we've got a deal, Toshinori said with a light chuckle. I'll be looking forward to it. Now that we've got that settled, perhaps you two can help me with this. Izuku and Toshinori turned to see Recovery Girl pointing at the pile of boxes. This thing isn't going to put itself together, and we need it ready for his first visit next week. The three stared at the brown boxes for a moment and let out a collective sigh, dreading the prospect of putting the machine together. I'm telling you, my boss is crazy, Hisoshi said over the phone. Last week he went on a trip to Ireland and came back with a sheep, and has been bringing it into the office ever since. That doesn't sound very sanitary, Inko asked, surprised. Is he allowed to do that? I don't think so, but no one wants to risk their neck getting him in trouble. Besides, the sheep doesn't really do anything, it just follows him around and bars for attention. You work with some interesting people, Dad, Izuku said as he tried to imagine a sheep wandering around an office building. No kidding. He named it Oliver Jr. Who the bloody hell names a sheep after himself? Izuku and Inko burst into a fit of giggles. Anyways, Hisoshi said, grabbing their attention. Have you figured out what you're gonna call your quirk, kiddo? Izuku blinked in surprise and sighed. No, not yet. He leaned back and stared at the ceiling, lips pressed into a thin line. Every name I come up with is either taken or just doesn't feel right. Why don't you use the name I suggested? It's catchy. Hisoshi declared cheerfully. Izuku covered his face with his hands and groaned. Dad, no. I'm not calling it that. Oh, come on. The Healing Touch is a great name. It's dramatic, mysterious, and sounds like something out of a comic book. It is, but it's a misnomer, Izuku grumbled. My quirk isn't touch-based, so the name doesn't make any sense. Why not just call it Healing Aura? Inko chimed in. It says what it is on the tin. I guess, but it's a little boring, Izuku said. Plus, it sounds too similar to Recovery Girl's quirk, Heal, he thought. He looked at his mother and continued. I want my quirk's name to be something that pops, something that rolls off the tongue and sticks in your head. Izuku's eyes were sparkling with excitement as he spoke. Oh, have you come up with any cool names? Inko asked. His shoulders slumped, and his face fell. No, every name I come up with is either boring or unoriginal. Ah hell. Don't worry about too much, Hisoshi said in a rather chipper voice. The perfect name will come to you when it comes to you. Izuku smiled. Yeah, guess you're right, Dad. Anyway, it's getting kind of late where you are. Shouldn't you get to bed? Izuku looked at the clock and saw it read 10. Oh yeah, guess I should. I don't want to doze off in class. He gave a nervous laugh, and his eyes darted away. Good night, Mom. Good night, Dad. Love you guys. Night, kiddo. Love you too. Good night, Izuku. I love you. Sleep tight. As Izuku went to his bedroom, Inko stared at his retreating form with lips pressed into a thin line. "Inko, you still there?" "Hey," Inko exclaimed, snapping out of her thoughts. "Oh, I'm still here, honey." "You went all quiet for a second. Everything okay?" She sighed. "I think Izuku is hiding something from me. He seemed nervous when he talked about going to school." "I wouldn't worry about too much. We all had secrets when we teenagers. But, if you're that anxious, you should go with your gut. They call it maternal instinct for a reason, love." "I suppose you're right," she said softly. "I'll ask him about it in a few days if I think it's really bothering him." "Sounds like a plan, Coco." Inko blinked in surprise and then giggled. "Hey, what's so funny?" "Nothing, Hisoshi," Inko replied. "It's just, well, it's been a while since you called Coco." "Oh," Hisoshi explained. "Geez, you're right, the last time I called you that god I can't remember." "I can't remember either," she said as played with her hair, her cheeks a soft pink. "I'd forgotten how much I missed it." "Well then, how about we celebrate with a little fun," he said in a sing-song voice. "Honey," Inko said with a cherry-red blush. "You know our baby's just down the hall. Besides, it's getting late, and I should get to bed too." "Ah, bloody hell. Alrighty then, sweet dreams, Cocoa Bean. Love you." "Love you too, honey buns, goodnight." With that, she hung up and went to her bedroom, a spring in her step but worry still lurking in the back of her mind. Have you ever met someone that just felt off to you? It's not that they are necessarily rude or mean, or that they've done anything bad. But when you met them, you had a gut reaction that told that you weren't going to like this person. That was how Izuku Midoriya felt when his homeroom teacher, Mr. Kita, first invited him to have lunch in the teacher's room with him. Despite this, you'd be hard-pressed to make Izuku say anything overtly negative about his bleached blonde teacher. Well, there was one bad thing Izuku might say about Mr. Kita. He loves the sound of his voice, Izuku thought as his teacher rambled on, the subject completely lost on Izuku as he subconsciously blocked him out. Once again, Mr. Kita had managed to track Izuku and invite him to have lunch together. Over the past few months, Izuku and Mr. Kita had developed a routine might be the best way to put it. Every day, Izuku would hurry out of the classroom at the sound of lunch bell and try to find a place to eat away from Mr. Kita, and Mr. Kita would try his best to track the green-haired boy down and invite him to the teacher's room. Izuku had gotten pretty good at avoiding the dyed, blonde man. On the other hand, Mr. Kita had become rather adept at tracking his student down. Overall, Izuku managed to avoid Mr. Kita about 50% of the time and could eat his massive lunch in relative peace. The other 50% of the time Mr. Kita managed to track Izuku down and invite to have lunch together, and despite how uncomfortable the man made him feel, Izuku couldn't bring himself to turn down the invitation. After all the time they'd spent together, Izuku had learned one undeniable fact about Mr. Kita: the man loved the sound of his voice more than life itself. Most of their conversations consisted of Mr. Kita talking at Izuku endlessly while the green-haired boy occasionally nodded or made sounds of agreement while keeping an eye on the clock, waiting for lunch to be over. Although, Izuku honestly preferred Mr. Kita talking at him rather than talking to him. "So, Izuku," Mr. Kita said in his sickeningly sweet voice, giant and unnerving smile still plastered across his face. "How was your weekend?" "Fine," Izuku answered stiffly as he cringed internally from his first name coming from Mr. Kita's mouth, although managing to stop himself from physically flinching. "It was fine." Mr. Kita's smile grew even wider. "Did you do anything interesting?" "No," Izuku said tersely. "Same as usual, nothing different." "Oh, come on, you must have done something interesting. Watch anything on TV, read any good books, listen to any cool podcasts?" "I'm all ears." Mr. Kita's eyes were practically sparkling as he spoke, they sent shivers down Izuku's spine. Well, I guess I did all those things," Izuku managed to choke out. He went dead silent while Mr. Kita kept staring at him, the same smile on the dyed, blonde's face. This was why Izuku was glad most of the time his homeroom teacher talked at him rather than to him. Whenever Mr. Kita asked him a question, Izuku would freeze up, paralyzed by his teacher's ever-present grin. Well, I guess I dash. BFNNG! Exclamation point. Izuku blurted out before he bolted out the door. Mr. Kita blinked in surprise but then smiled. That went well. Really, another teacher with curly orange hair and brown eyes said as he poured himself a cup of coffee from a thermos. He bolted as soon as the bell rang. That kid is effing terrified of you. He's not leaving before the bell rings anymore. That's an improvement, Mr. Kita said with the sly smile. Midoriya is warming up to me, then it's a one-way ticket to Easy Street. The orange-haired man gave Mr. Kita a flat look. You're delusional. You're just jealous you didn't get to him first, Honda, the blonde man said in an almost sing-song voice. Imagine it, with an amazing quirk like his, everyone will want a piece of Midoriya when he graduates, and I'll have all the credit for molding him into the great young man he'll become. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling, a manic look in his eyes. Soon enough, he'll be putty in my hand. Mr. Kita's mind was consumed by images of Izuku going on to be wealthy and successful and, most importantly, sharing it with his inspirational homeroom teacher who guided Izuku and pushed him to succeed. Mr. Kita felt bubbles welling up inside him, giddy with excitement. A few chuckles escaped his lips before he burst into excited laughter, spinning around his chair the whole while. Mr. Honda looked at the blonde man with a twitching eye. He pulled out a flask from his desk and poured a generous portion in his cup of coffee. It's too early for Kita's bullshit, Mr. Honda grumbled under his breath. Honda, a woman with a dark chocolate bob and pink eyes said, catching his attention. It's 1 o'clock. He raised an eyebrow and took a sip. Your point, Sasaki. She sighed. Give it here. Mr. Honda handed Ms. Sasaki the flask, and she put more than a few splashes into her own mug, all the while Mr. Kita span in his chair, laughing like a madman. It was 10 o'clock on Saturday when Recovery Girl arrived at Musutafu General Hospital with Izuku in tow. She was dressed in a white blouse, a ruffled pink skirt, a tan shawl, and black slip-ons. Izuku wore a black t-shirt with All Might across the chest in yellow lettering surrounded in red, white, and blue stars, khaki shorts, and his favorite red boots. Today he also wore a green and white checkered hip bag along with bracelets, and choker Recovery Girl had made for him. His eyes darted around nervously as he walked, sweat on his brow. Wow, they look swamped in work. Are you sure it's okay for us to just come in? Now, there's no need to worry, Recovery Girl said. I called them this morning and told them I was bringing you with me. They'll have picked out a patient for you by now. Oh, right, Izuku squeaked. A patient picked out, for me. The person I'll be healing, with my quirk that I will use to heal them. Izuku went silent before forcing out an unnerving laugh that drew the attention of several staff and patients. Recovery Girl stared at Izuku as if he'd suddenly grown a second head. Are you alright? Fine. Izuku blurted out. She raised an eyebrow. Izuku sighed. Alright, the truth is I'm nervous. I know I've technically been healing Yagi since we met, but that's just my passive radiation. It doesn't mean I can actively heal other people. What if it doesn't work? Calm down, Midoriya, Recovery Girl placated. I know your quirk will work, you've got nothing to fear. You're sure? Absolutely, 100% sure it'll work? Izuku asked, almost shaking. Yes, she stated. Recovery Girl grabbed his hand. You're going to do great, I promise. Izuku went still for a moment, he then let out a breath, and his shoulders went slack. Okay. Recovery Girl smiled. Well, glad you got that out of your system. Before we check in, do you remember our cover story? Izuku nodded. I'm your grandnephew via your sister who's come with you to train my quirk, is that right? Got it in one, she said with a grin. They walked for about a minute, and he found himself standing in front of a receptionist next to Recovery Girl. Ah, Miss Shuzenji, it's great see you again, the receptionist said with a smile on her face. And this must be your grandnephew. Yes, this is Izuku Midoriya, my sister's grandchild, Recovery Girl said. Hello, it's nice to meet you, Izuku said. And you're here to train your quirk, right? The receptionist asked as she looked over her computer. You've come in at just the right time. There's a patient in the urgent care who just came in with a broken hand. Will that do? That's perfect, Izuku exclaimed. Thank you so much. She giggled. You're welcome. Wait right here, and I'll have someone take you straight to her. A few minutes later a nurse came to the desk and led them to the urgent care. Here we are, exam room UR27, the nurse said. Your patient is right in there. Do you need anything else? Thank you, but we can take it from here, Recovery Girl said. I know my way around a hospital quite well. Okay, I'll leave you to it, the nurse said with a wave goodbye. What a nice young person, Recovery Girl said before turning to Izuku. Was that nurse a man or a woman? I couldn't tell. No idea, Izuku replied, scratching the back of his head. But they are very nice. Indeed. Now let's head inside, can't keep your patient waiting, Recovery Girl said with a smile. Recovery Girl knocked on the door, and they entered the room. Immediately, they saw a girl about Izuku's age sitting on the exam table while a man and woman stood off to the side. She was a petite, fair-skinned girl with shoulder-length chestnut hair and large, round hazel eyes. Her outfit consisted of a pink t-shirt, black shorts, and brown shoes. Her right arm was in a sling. The woman had russet brown hair in a similar style to the girl's, but longer, and powder blue eyes. She wore a white blouse and a tan skirt. The man had short dark blonde hair and hazel eyes, the same as the girl's. He wore a salmon pink button-up shirt and jeans. Oh, hello, the girl said. Are you the doctor? Sort of, Recovery Girl replied. My name is Chiyo Shuzenji, and I'll be overseeing your treatment today. I'm Okako Uraraka, the girl said with a smile. It's nice to meet you. Hey there, the man exclaimed, drawing Recovery Girl's attention. I'm her papa, Osamu Uraraka, and this her mama, Etsuko. It's a pleasure to meet you, Etsuko said with a slight bow. It's very nice to meet you all, Recovery Girl said. And this is my grandnephew. She trailed off when she noticed their wide-eyed stares. What are you staring at? Is he okay? Okako almost whispered, pointing a finger behind Recovery Girl. Taken aback by her question, Recovery Girl blinked in surprise. Is he what? She asked as she took in the shocked looks on all their faces as they stared directly behind her. What are you talking, Obu? Good God, what happened to you? She screamed as she turned around to see what had them all in a tizzy. Izuku, for lack of a better term, was freaking out. His eyes were wide, his body was trembling, tiny droplets of sweat covered his face, and while his mouth was open, no words came out, only a high-pitched wheezing sound. A girl. Izuku thought, knees trembling and mouth dry as a desert. Holy crap, my patient's a girl, and she's cute. His cheeks lit up at that last thought. Okay, calm down, calm down, calm down, I've talked to girls before, okay, I've talked to my mom and Recovery Girl, and I'm pretty sure they don't technically count. It was then he finally noticed everyone's shocked stares. Crap, 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 crap. They are staring. Of course they are staring, I'm standing here like a mental patient. Goddamn it, Izuku, get yourself together. At that moment, Izuku did the only thing he could think of. Slap. He slapped himself in the face with both hands. The stinging pain snapped him out of his internal ramblings and gave him back control of his body. Hi there, Izuku stammered out while everyone's gazes intensified. My name is Izuku Midoriya. Lifting his legs as if they'd suddenly turned into lead, he somehow managed to make his way over to the examination table. It's nice to meet you, I'm going to be healing you today. Izuku gave a nervous smile and extended his hand. Okako stared at him for a moment, still trying to process what she'd just seen. It's nice to meet you too. She looked down at Izuku's hand, then back at her own in its sling. Oh crap! Izuku exclaimed as he pulled back his hand. Sorry about that, so. He let out a nervous laugh as he rubbed the back of his head. Excuse me, Recovery Girl said, grabbing everyone's attention. But now that we have introductions out of the way, we should get things moving. Oh, thank goodness, Izuku thought with a sigh of relief. Recovery Girl made her way to the exam room's computer and logged in. Now then, Okako, was it? Can you please tell me how you broke your hand? Okako went bug-eyed at the question. Why? Her voice was breathless as she spoke. Recovery Girl raised an eyebrow. Establishing the cause of injury is standard procedure. Well, the thing is, Okako said, turning her eyes away from Recovery Girl. How I broke it is kind of embarrassing. Can we please skip this part? Young lady, I can assure you that whatever happened, I've heard worse, Recovery Girl said. I've seen some pretty strange injuries in my time. Besides, it's not like I'll tell anyone, doctor-patient confidentiality and all that. The thing is, Okako muttered. I sort of dash. It was my fault. Osamu exclaimed, nervous sweat covering his brow. I accidentally slammed the door on her hand. Recovery Girl said nothing for a few seconds but then smiled. Well, I suppose that is embarrassing, but it's far from the worst I've heard. Thank goodness she believed that, Okako thought as she let her shoulders drop. I don't believe them for a second, Recover Girl thought. They're clearly lying, but I won't press them about it. For now. Are you going to put my hand in a cast now? Okako asked. No, actually, Recovery Girl replied. Izuku will be using his quirk to heal your injury. That's me, Izuku said with a nervous chuckle. Hold on, Etsuko said, eyeing Recovery Girl suspiciously. Don't you need a special license to use your quirk in public? Yes, and I have one. I've also secured special permission for him to use his quirk under my supervision, Recovery Girl explained. Izuku, if you could please get started. Alright, Izuku blurted out. He turned back to face Okako and extended his hand once again. I need to hold your hand so I can fix it. His face turned cherry red at that statement. Okay, Okako said. She slipped her hand out of her sling, wincing as she did so, and gently placed it in Izuku's. Wow, she has really nice skin, he thought, his blush growing even redder. He shook his head, banishing the thoughts from his mind. Just focus on healing her. He placed his other hand on top of hers, sandwiching it between his. Is this all right? He asked. Okako nodded, a pained grimace on her face. It hurts, but I'm fine. Just do what you've got to do. Right, he affirmed with a smile. Izuku closed his eyes and concentrated, taking slow deep breaths. He found the well of energy inside himself and readied himself to open the floodgates. Okako watched him with rapt attention, wondering what exactly he was doing. He's concentrating hard like he's meditating. Although, it looks like he trying to take a poop with that face he's making. She stifled a giggle. I wonder how his quirk works. She gasped as she got her answer. The boy in front of her was enveloped in soft, green aura. Okako's eyes widened as she stared, captivated by how the light emanating from Izuku's body shifted and moved. Seeing Izuku's quirk in action was mesmerizing, and as the energy danced across his body, Okako couldn't help but feel safe. It felt as though she was being enveloped in a warm hug or a soft blanket. She felt protected and at peace. Before she even realized, the aura around surrounding Izuku's hands grew brighter and more vibrant, and the pain in her hand had vanished. As quickly as it came, the aura vanished. Izuku opened his and gave a tired smile. There, that should do it. He glanced down and realized he was still holding Okako's hand. Turning bright red, he tore his hands from Okako's and muttered an apology. So, how's your hand? Izuku asked nervously. Giving her fingers an experimental wiggle, Okako gave a bright smile. It's all better, no pain at all. Your quirk is awesome, it's like I never broke it. Izuku smiled back. Well, that's good. For a second there I was afraid it wouldn't work. Surprised at his statement, Okako was about to ask him what he meant, but Recovery Girl unintentionally cut her off. Excellent work, Midoriya. Now, you go find a place to rest while I take her to get an X-ray, just to double-check that everything healed properly and so they can get out of here. Okay, he said before letting out a yawn before leaving the room. An hour later, Okako found herself wandering the halls of the hospital while her parents were busy filling out paperwork. The new X-rays had come back clean and showed her hand to be in perfect condition. Because her parents still had to sign some documents due to the unique nature of her treatment, Osamu had given Okako some pocket money to grab herself a snack at the hospital's cafe. Where the heck is it? I feel like I'm going in circles, Okiko thought with a pout as she wandered the halls. Looking around, she grew more and more frustrated at her fruitless search for a sign or a map. Turning another corner, she found herself in the hospital's pharmacy and sighed in frustration. Suddenly, something caught her attention out of the corner of her eye, a familiar mop of curly green hair, and the boy was attached too. He was sleeping in a chair with his head lolled forward, chest slowly rising and falling with every breath. That's a weird place to take a nap, Okiko thought. But his neck's going to be killing him if he sleeps like that. Better go wake him up. She walked over to him and nudged his shoulder. "Gwa! Who's there?" Izuku yelled, springing awake. "Ah!" Okiko yelped, grabbing the boy's attention. Their eyes met, and an awkward silence filled the air. Hi. Sorry for waking you up, but I didn't want you to get a stiff neck." "Oh, thank you," he said sheepishly. "Uraka, wasn't it?" She nodded. "Your name's Midoriya." She sat down next to him. "I hope you don't mind, but why were you sleeping here?" A blush spread across his face as he rubbed the back of his neck. "Well, you see, it was kind of an accident. I was looking for the cafe and got lost. I sat down to rest my feet and fell asleep without noticing." Okiko burst out into a fit of giggles. "Sorry, but I'm not laughing at you," she said as she calmed herself down. "That's actually how I ended up here too." Izuku let out a sigh of relief. "Well, that's a relief. For a second I thought Jija. He went dead silent at the sound of his rumbling stomach, an absolutely mortified expression on his face. "Sorry, I'm just really hungry." "Oh, I get it," Okiko exclaimed, drawing Izuku's attention. "It's because of your quirk, right?" "Why?" Izuku said, a bright look in his eyes. "My quirk allows me to use my body's energy reserves to heal my own and other people's injuries, like your broken hand. I don't know the exact extent of it, like if I can buffer a body's immune system and increase white blood cell production, but it doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility. I've still got a long way to go, but learning about my quirk has been really exciting." By the end of his explanation, Izuku's eyes were practically sparkling. "Wow, that's really cool," Okiko said excitedly, invigorated by Izuku's enthusiasm. "Just listening to you talk gets me pumped up. But that drawback must SK. I'd hate it if I got tired and hungry every time I used my quirk." "Actually," Izuku said as he reached into his hip bag. "That's why my great-aunt gave me these." In his hands were a couple of mud-colored, ball-shaped gummy candies, each about the size of a small chicken egg. They are special gummy candies packed to the brim calories, fats, and vitamins to help me recharge after using my quirk. Izuku's expression twisted into one of disgust and horror. "The only problem is they taste awful." His turned a sickly shade of green as recalled trying to eat one after healing Okiko and promptly spitting it out. "I appreciate her making them for me, but I just can't swallow them." Okiko gave him a sympathetic look, unsure of what to do. Then she looked behind him and saw a pair of vending machines, and a light bulb went off. "Wait right here," she said as she stood up. Grabbing the money her father had given her, Okiko walked to the drink vending machine. Looking at the options available, her eyes landed on some relatively cheap canned green tea. She bought 3 cans from the machine and walked back to Izuku. "Here you go," she said, handing 2 cans to Izuku. "Try washing them down with this." Warily eyeing the 2 gummies in his hand, he took a deep breath and opened the first can. "Here goes nothing." He popped 1 gummy in mouth hole and chewed like there was no tomorrow. Just when he was about to spit it out, he shotgunned the first green tea and washed it down his throat. Without missing a beat, he repeated the process with the other gummy and can. "Thank you, Uraka," Izuku breathed with a smile. "I don't think I could have swallowed them without the tea." "No problem," Okiko chirped. "It's the least I could do after you dash." "Jija." She was cut off by the sound of her growling stomach. Although nowhere near as loud as Izuku's, she couldn't help but feel embarrassed. "I didn't have a chance to eat breakfast this morning," Okiko explained as stared down at her feet. Izuku stared at her for a minute before softly chuckling. "Why don't we go find a cafe, and I'll buy you something to eat?" After asking one of the pharmacy employees where it was and finding out the cafe was on the opposite end of the hospital, the two teens made their way there. The cafe itself, simply called Musutafu General Cafe, was a relatively nice establishment that provided a surprisingly wide variety of food and drinks considering it was inside a hospital. Okiko ended up getting, well, Izuku had bought her, a bento with broiled salmon over white rice with a side salad, along with some red bean mochi for dessert and her can of green tea from the pharmacy. Izuku had gotten himself a chicken bento, a steak bento, a pork bento, and a yellowtail bento. When he was done with these, he'd head back to grab some desserts. "Wow, you're really packing it away," Okiko exclaimed as Izuku finished off his first bento when she'd only eaten half of hers. "Did the gummies not work?" "No, they did," Izuku answered. "But I overdid when I fixed your hand, so I'm still starving." At the mention him healing her hand, Okiko looked down at her lunch with a downcast expression. "You know, I never actually thanked you for that. I tried to say it back at the pharmacy after I gave you the green tea, but then my stupid stomach got in the way." She sighed and turned her eyes back to Izuku. "Now here you are, buying me lunch. I feel like I'm taking advantage of you." No, you're not," Izuku blurted out in a panic, snapping Okiko out her funk. "I'm the one who offered, so there's nothing for you to feel bad about." A small frown crept onto her face. "I know, but still." Unsure of what to say to her, Izuku clamped up. He thought about what his mother or Toshinori and tried to imagine what they might do in this situation. Then it struck him as he recalled the money his mentor would give him. "Well, if you're trying to thank me for buying you lunch, you're doing a lousy job of it," Izuku said. "When someone gives you a gift, the best thing you can do is take it and appreciate it. If you don't, then it's like you're saying that it's not good enough or that you're taking the person for granted." He looked at her straight on, a strange sort of determination in his eyes. "So, if you want to thank me for buying you lunch, the best thing you can do is enjoy with a smile on your face." Okiko gaped at him in shock. Finally realizing what he'd said, Izuku turned bone white. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. What I meant was dash." He was cut off by the sound of laughter. He looked and saw Okiko laughing with a smile on her face, all traces of guilt and apprehension gone. "You know what, you're right," she said with bright and cheery eyes. "I'm going to enjoy this awesome food my awesome new friend bought me." Okiko gave Izuku a soft, warm smile. "Thank you so much, my Doria, for the food and the fixing my hand. You're a wonderful person." Izuku's face turned pink as her words filled him with pure joy. Why, you're welcome, Uraka." He rubbed the back of his neck, his body humming with giddy nerves. She dug into her food with renewed happiness. They talked as they ate, discussing everything from schoolwork and the weather to their favorite pro heroes and TV shows. It was awkward at first. Izuku had never really had a civil and casual conversation with someone his own age since he was about 4 or 5, but he felt like he was getting the hang of it. Okiko finished off the last of her mochi and let out a content sigh. "That was good," she exclaimed, as she sank into her chair. "Yeah, I'm surprised by the quality," Izuku said as he finished off his third bento. He glanced back at Okiko and bit his lip. "Hey, can I ask you something?" Okiko perked up at his question and sat upright. "Sure." "The thing is," he began as he started twiddling his thumbs. "How do I put this? Did you sort of, maybe, possibly lie to my great-aunt about how you broke your hand?" She went dead quiet at his question, eyes wide with shock. "I'm not saying you did," Izuku said abruptly. "It's just that, whenever she thinks someone is lying to her, she scrunches her nose. And she did that back there like she could." Izuku's mind went blank as tried to think of what to say next. "Like she could smell our bullshit." Izuku was flung back to reality at the sound of Okiko's voice. "Guess she saw right through my dad and me." She gave a nervous laugh. "Do you want to know how I actually broke my hand?" Izuku nodded. "Promise not to tell anyone else." He nodded again. "Okay," she breathed. "I broke my hand when I was practicing using my quirk." Izuku instantly perked up at the word quirk. "My mom and dad run a construction company, and for the past few weeks, my dad and I have been getting early to go to the site so I can practice. But this morning I lost control, and my hand ended up getting crushed under a metal crate. We didn't want to get in trouble, so my dad came up with that door story on the fly. Does your quirk have something to with the pads on your fingertips? Izuku asked. I felt them when I was healing your hand. Okiko nodded and showed him the palms of her hands and the little pink pads at ends of her fingers and thumbs. Izuku thought they looked like a cat's paw pads. Do want to see it in action? Yes, please. Izuku beamed, his eye practically sparkling. She glanced around to make sure no one was watching and grabbed her empty green tea can. A soft pink light emanated the pads for a split second, and when she let go of the can started to float. Izuku was mesmerized as the can rose above their heads, mentally kicking himself for not bringing his notebook with him. Okiko pressed the tips of her fingers together and said, "Release." The can fell, and Okiko barely caught it before it hit the table. Toda! That's my quirk, zero gravity. I can cancel out the effect of gravity on anything I touch and press my pads together to stop it. Although, I've got a weight limit and if I go past it I'll throw up. Oh wow, your quirk is incredible, Izuku exclaimed. You think so? Okiko asked hesitantly. I mean, I've never thought of it as anything special. There are so many other quirks that way cooler and stronger than mine, like yours. No way, your quirk's awesome, Izuku declared. I think mine's amazing, but they are too different to compare. You could send someone into space with a tap, or stop a building from collapsing. He gave Okiko the biggest and brightest smile she could muster. I'd love it if I had your quirk. To say Okiko was overwhelmed would be an understatement. She'd never heard anyone talk so passionately her quirk before and was practically over the moon. Thank you so much, Midoriya, she beamed. So, what do you call your quirk? Oh, Izuku said, his voice suddenly very small. The name of my quirk's name, here. Okiko watched in confusion as Izuku squirmed in his seat as if someone had just dumped itching powder down his pants. Are you okay? You don't look so good. No. I'm fine, Izuku said cautiously. It's just, the thing, He forced a nervous laugh as he rubbed the back of his neck. I haven't named it yet. Wait, really? Why not? She asked in shock. She remembered having trouble naming hers when she'd first gotten it, but to think someone her age still hadn't named their quirk was beyond her. The thing is, I only found out I have a quirk about 4 months ago, Izuku began. You see, I have 2 joints in my pinky toes instead of 1, and it's nothing like my parents, so my quirkologist assumed I was quirkless and didn't do any genetic tests to check. So you never used your quirk before a few months ago? Technically, my quirk is always on, Izuku said. You see, my body is actually constantly emitting low-level healing radiation, but it's not strong enough to cause the glow like when I healed you. It's kind of like when you've got a TV plugged in, there's always an electrical current running through it even when it's not in use, but you wouldn't know unless you turned it. I only found out because I got a job about 5 months ago, and when I started my boss was sick, then he started getting better really fast, so my great-aunt decided to investigate. Okiko didn't know what saw in response to his story. It was an incredible story, and she was happy for Izuku, but she'd never been in a situation like this before and probably never would be again. So she just said the first thing that came to mind. You know, your quirk reminds me of the sun, Okiko said absent-mindedly. Izuku thought as he stared at her, unsure of what he was supposed to say in response. I'm the sun? That came out weird. Sorry, she said as mentally kicking herself. What I mean is that even when you're not bright and shiny, your quirk's still there. Kind of like how on a rainy day I know the sun's just behind the clouds, or when it sets I know it'll rise again in the morning. And, this is embarrassing, but when you used your quirk on me, I felt warm and safe and full of life. It was like standing in a ray of sunshine after spending all your time indoors. Her words brought a blush to Izuku's face. Wow, that's really sweet of you to say. Thank you, Uraraka. Hey, Okiko, a voice called out. They turned to see Okiko's parents and recovery girl walking towards them. Sorry we took so long, baby girl, Osamu said. Confused by her father's statement, Okiko looked at her phone and checked the time. Holy crap! How the heck does paperwork take that long? She'd been having such a pleasant time with Izuku, the time had completely passed her by. Osamu gave a nervous laugh as small beads of sweat formed on his forehead. Well, the thing is, Etsuko said with a wavering voice. The reason we took so long was that. She trailed off, her nerves overtaking her ability to speak. Why don't I explain? Recovery Girl said with a smile. Osamu and Etsuko opened their mouths, but no sound came out as Recovery Girl walked up to Okiko. You see, I was just giving your parents a little lecture on why they should never lie to medical professionals. Her voice took on a sharp and dangerous edge at the word never. Okiko felt a chill go down her spine as Recovery Girl gave her a dark look. I don't feel giving that lecture again, but I'm sure you can understand why lying to your doctor is a terrible thing to do. Recovery Girl asked with a menacing calm. Of course, Okiko blurted, practically shaking in her seat. Lying to your doctor is wrong, and I'll never do it again. Promise? Yes. I promise to never, ever lie to a doctor ever again. At this, Okiko had literally started shaking. Recovery Girl stared at her for a moment, the tension so thick you'd need a chainsaw to cut through it. Suddenly, Recovery Girl let out a breath, and her shoulders slumped. The tension disappeared so fast it was almost unnatural. That's wonderful, dearie. Her dark expression was gone and replaced by a warm smile. I'm so glad you said that. I really didn't feel like whacking you over the head with my cane. Osamu and Etsuko flinched at the mention of her cane. Okiko tried to laugh it off, but only a strangled wheezing noise came out. How can a little old lady doctor be so freaking scary? Recovery Girl turned back to Osamu and Etsuko, who both looked at her like she was some sort of venomous animal. I hope you all have a wonderful day. She extended her hand, and they eyed it warily. When they realized she wasn't going to strike them, Osamu and Etsuko both gingerly shook Recovery Girl's hand. Hey, kid, Osamu said as he turned to Izuku and extended his hand. Thanks for fixing my baby girl's hand. It was no trouble, Mr. Uraraka, Izuku said as he gave him a firm shake. I'm happy to help. Oh, you're such a sweet young man, Etsuko said, taking Izuku's hand as soon as he'd let go of Osamu's. Your parents must be so proud of you. Yeah, they sure are, Izuku said vaguely, wondering in the back of his mind just how mad his mom and dad would be if they found out he was going being their backs to train with All Might and Recovery Girl. The Urarakas said their goodbyes and headed towards the door. Just before they vanished out of sight, Okiko turned back and waved to Izuku. He gave a small, cheery smile as he waved back and she disappeared out of sight. Izuku felt somebody staring at him and looked down to see Recovery Girl smiling at him. I see you made a new friend, she remarked. Izuku opened his mouth to protest her claim, but then stopped himself and smiled back. Yeah, I guess I did. Now, finish your food because I know you overdid it when you healed her, she said. We'll see 1 or 2 more patients, and we'll be on our way. Okay, Izuku said as got started on last bento. By the way, can we do something about the gummies? Recovery Girl raised an eyebrow at him. What's wrong them? What followed was probably one of the biggest regrets of Recovery Girl's long and storied life as she proceeded to dispose of her stomach contents into the nearest trash can after taking a bite of one of those mud-colored abominations. You'd think that as Japan's #1 hero, All Might, Toshinori Yagi would live in a mansion. While he certainly had more than enough money to buy at least 100 mansions, it had never been his style. He did have a few dozen small, inconspicuous pieces of property all around the country, condos and small one-story houses. His work often took him all across Japan, and he always preferred the privacy and stability of having his own place to rest his head over hotel and inns. His house in Musutafu was his largest piece of property, a modestly sized 2-story building in a sleepy little suburb. This was where he found himself, lying awake in bed unable to fall back asleep. Toshinori sighed and grabbed his phone from the nightstand and saw it read September 16th, 4:09 a.m. Might as well get up. Reluctantly, he got out of bed and showered. The sun still hadn't risen by the time he was done. Deciding it was too early for breakfast, Toshinori put on a canary yellow tracksuit, stuffed a few energy bars in his pockets, and drove down to Dagobah Beach. He hadn't expected anyone to be down here this ungodly hour, especially since no one usually came down here at all. So Toshinori was more than a little surprised to see a familiar green-haired boy in a green tracksuit and red shoes doing stretches in the sand. "Young Midoriya," the blonde man called out. "Yagi?" Izuku said in surprise. He stood up to see his guess was correct. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," Toshinori said in a somewhat accusatory tone. "We agreed Sundays were your day off." He furrowed his brow and pursed his lips. "You haven't been training behind my back? Because that'll have the opposite effect we want." "No. Of course not," Izuku pleaded. "Our next-door neighbor's just had another baby, and she's been crying non-stop. My mom couldn't sleep either, so we decided to get out of the house." He yawned, tears pricked the corners of his eyes. "I went for a jog, and my feet took me here." "That's a relief. It's too early to act like a teacher and punish you," Toshinori teased, and he and Izuku shared a laugh. "So what are you doing here?" Izuku asked. Toshinori froze up, the nightmare that kept him awake flooding back into his mind. In actuality, it wasn't a nightmare, but a memory. A terrible, terrible memory had haunted him for decades that he could still recall it in horrific, vivid detail. "All Might, I leave the rest to you," her voice rang through Toshinori's head loud and clear. "Neighbor's dogs," he blurted out. "My next-door neighbors own a bunch of those tiny, yappy dogs. One of them must have seen a squirrel or something and started barking, then set the rest off." It wasn't a total lie. The old couple next door owned quite a few tiny but very loud dogs, and they'd woken him up on more than one occasion. They decided to do a few laps around the park together. Izuku slowed down to make sure Toshinori kept pace in his true form. After about an hour of jogging, mentor and protege sat down on the sand together facing the sea. Both were munching on some of the energy bars Toshinori had brought along with him. The blonde man checked his phone, saw the time was 5:19 a.m. "I think Jinko's opens at 6. Why don't we do a couple more laps and I'll take you there for breakfast?" Izuku nodded vigorously. "Hound squeer. Swallow before you talk, young Midoriya." "Howie," Izuku said through a mouthful of energy before swallowing. "I said that it sounds great." He stood up and started stretching. "Hold up, kid," Toshinori said as he was looking at his phone. "The sun's gonna rise in a few minutes. Sit back down and watch." "Okay," Izuku said, staring at his mentor as he sat back down. Toshinori took a deep breath and let his body relax, a content smile on his face. "You know, the life of a pro hero isn't easy, especially for the higher ranks. It's not every day we get to enjoy the simple things in life like watching a sunrise. You've got to make these moments count and cherish them for as long as you live." "Actually, you just reminded me of something," Izuku said, drawing his mentor's attention. "It's silly, but yesterday at the hospital, there was this girl whose hand I fixed with my quirk. We ended up having lunch together, and she said my quirk was like the sun." "I don't think it's silly at all." Izuku looked up at his mentor in surprise. "The sun has always been a symbol of life and hope, and with your quirk, you can save people from the brink of death and give them hope." Toshinori smiled at Izuku. "I think she was right on the money." Izuku was about to respond, but then it happened. Slowly but surely, the sun came into view, painting the dark with brilliant pinks, purples, and reds. The ocean's surface exploded into a stunning, shimmering display of dancing lights, like trillions of shining diamonds. Izuku's jaw dropped as the sunlight kissed his face, warming his skin and reinvigorating him as energy he didn't know he had sparked to life. He watched as the sun rose higher into the sky, piercing the veil of night and bringing forth a new day. It was one of the most beautiful sights the boy had ever seen. "Wow," Izuku spoke in a whisper, afraid to disturb the tranquil sight before him. He turned to Toshinori and thought about his words and what Okako had told him the day before. In an instant he knew what he had to do. "Hey, Yagi," Izuku said, drawing Toshinori out of his musings. "I think I know what I want to call my quirk." Odd timing, but okay, the blonde man thought as watched his protege stand up. "Do you know what a corona is?" Toshinori thought for a moment but said no. "The corona is the aura of plasma that surrounds the sun and other stars," Izuku explained as his voice slowly filled with passion and vigor. If my quirk is like the sun, then my aura is like its corona. Izuku turned around, and Toshinori was awestruck by the fire in the boy's eyes. Mending corona, Izuku called out, his voice shaking Toshinori to the very core. That's what I'll call it, a quirk to give people hope and save lives. Almost on instinct, Toshinori stood up and placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. My boy, I think it's a wonderful name, he said with the fullest, proudest smile he could muster.